I'm 18, and honestly, my life's been a bit of a roller coaster for as long as I can remember. This isn't a pity party, though. It's about what happened when I finally decided to take the reins of my life and the house I grew up in. Let's just say things got messy, and not in a fun way. Some backstory. My dad passed away when I was 10. It sucked, obviously. He wasn't just my dad. He was my best friend. He left me our house and some savings in a trust fund. My grandparents managed it all since I was just a kid. The house was supposed to be legally mine when I turned 18, but until then my mom had full access because, she was supposed to take care of me. Except, that didn't exactly go as planned. My mom remarried when I was 12 to a guy we'll call John, and that's when things really changed. John had 2 kids of his own, and suddenly it felt like my mom had this whole new life, this new family, and I was just there, like an old couch they hadn't gotten around to tossing out. At first, I tried to make it work. I was 12. What else could I do? John wasn't terrible to me, but he wasn't great either. He treated me like a guest in my own home, and his kids? Don't even get me started. They weren't mean, but they were loud, messy, and entitled. They'd take over the living room, leave their stuff everywhere, and basically ignored me most of the time. By high school, I'd figured out how things worked. If I wanted something done, I had to do it myself. My mom was too busy playing supermom to John's kids. My room was the only place I felt like I had any control, and even that started to change. Slowly, John's kids' stuff started creeping in. Old toys, random junk, even boxes of clothes. One time, I came home to a broken scooter in the corner of my room. When I asked my mom about it, she just shrugged and said there was no space in the garage. At that point, I was spending more time at my grandparents' than at home. They were the ones who actually cared, helped me with school, and just listened. My grandpa especially always had my back. He's a man of few words, but he always knows what to do. Fast forward to a few weeks before my 18th birthday. My grandparents sat me down to talk about the house. My grandpa, chill as always, said, "The house is going to be yours soon, legally. You'll have full control, and it's up to you what you want to do with it." I nodded, but in my head I was thinking, cool, but nothing's really going to change, right? Man, I had no idea how wrong I was. It was the night before my birthday, and I was actually kind of excited. Turning 18 is a big deal, right? You can vote, you're technically an adult, and in my case I was finally going to own my house. It felt like a new chapter. I imagined a decent birthday, nothing fancy. Maybe a family dinner, a cake, some small gifts, just something to mark the day. But no, of course not. I was on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when my mom strolled in. She had a travel bag and that spaced-out look she always gets when she's not really paying attention. "Oh, by the way," she says, like she's reminding me to take out the trash. "We're leaving tomorrow for a vacation. Just me, John, and the kids. You don't mind staying here alone?" I blinked at her. I honestly thought I'd misheard. "Wait, you're leaving tomorrow? That's my birthday." She barely looked up. "Yeah, I know, but we've had this trip planned for months. You'll be fine. You're old enough to handle yourself. Order some pizza or something." That was her big plan for my 18th birthday. No party, no dinner, no acknowledgement that the day even mattered. I felt this anger rising in my chest. I wanted to yell, "Are you serious right now?" But I didn't. What would be the point? So I just sat there, staring at her while she walked away, completely unfazed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of suitcases rolling down the hallway. I got up, still half asleep, and walked into the kitchen. There they were, my mom, John, and the kids, all dressed up in their vacation clothes, looking like the perfect family. My mom glanced at me as she poured herself some coffee. "Oh, good, you're up. Don't forget to lock the door when we leave." I leaned against the counter, watching them laugh and joke, completely ignoring me. "So you're really just leaving?" I asked, feeling like I was holding back a tidal wave. John looked up from his phone. "Come on, man, you're 18. You don't need a babysitter. Besides, This trip's been on the calendar for weeks. I just stood there, gripping the counter. My mom didn't even look at me when she said, "We'll be back in a week. There's food in the fridge." And then they simply left. I stood in the doorway and watched them pile into the car, laughing and talking like they were headed to Disneyland. Nobody looked back. They just drove off, leaving me standing there in my pajamas, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I closed the door, locked it like she told me to, and for a moment, I just stood there in the empty house. The silence was deafening. I spent the morning in a weird haze. I didn't know whether to be angry, sad, or just numb. I opened the fridge to see what food my mom had left for me. It was pathetic. Half a carton of milk, some old takeout containers, and a box of frozen chicken nuggets. Cool, I thought. Happy freaking birthday to me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandma. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We'll be over soon. Love you." That text hit me like a lifeline. I don't know what I would have done without my grandparents. They showed up about an hour later, with a cake, balloons, and a gift bag. The second I opened the door, my grandma pulled me into a hug and said, "Happy birthday, my boy." My grandpa followed with a proud smile and a wrapped gift. They didn't just save my birthday, they saved me. We spent the afternoon in the living room, eating cake and talking. They told me stories about my dad, how proud he'd be of me, how much he loved me. It was the first time in forever that I felt like I actually mattered to someone. After cake, my grandpa handed me an envelope. "This is from the lawyer," he said. "It's official now. The house is yours." I opened it, and there it was, the paperwork that made me the legal owner of the house. My grandpa smiled. "This is your home now. You're in charge." For a second, I didn't know how to feel. On the one hand, it felt good, really good, to finally have something that was mine. On the other hand, it made me realize just how messed up things had gotten. This house had been my dad's gift to me, a place where I was supposed to feel safe and loved. Instead, it had become John's playground, and I was treated like an unwanted guest. My grandma must have noticed the look on my face, because she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You deserve to be happy here. If anyone makes you feel otherwise, remember you have the power to change that." Her words stuck with me, but I didn't know what to do with them just yet. That night, after my grandparents left, I was lying in bed scrolling through Instagram when I saw my mom's post. It was a picture of her, John, and the kids, all grinning in matching outfits at some fancy resort. I don't know why I clicked on the comments, but I did. It was full of stuff like, "What a beautiful family," and "You're such an amazing mom," and not a single mention of me. They didn't see me as part of their family. I wasn't their son or their brother. I was just the guy who happened to live in their house. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to keep living like this. This house was mine, and it was time I started acting like it. The day after my birthday, I woke up with this weird mix of determination and dread. Part of me was ready to take back control of my life and this house, but the other part was scared of what that actually meant. It's not like I'd ever stood up to my mom before. Not really. Most of the time I just kept my mouth shut because it was easier than dealing with the fallout. But after what happened on my birthday, I couldn't keep doing that. I wasn't just some kid who had to put up with their crap anymore, so I decided to take a hard look at the state of things. Let me tell you, this house was a disaster. The living room was covered in their stuff, John's tools, the kids' toys, random junk they hadn't bothered to put away. The kitchen. Gross. But the worst part was my room. I opened the door, and it was like stepping into a storage unit. Boxes everywhere. My desk, the one place I used to sit and do my homework or just chill, was buried under stacks of papers and old magazines. My bed was pushed into the corner, almost like an afterthought, while the rest of the space was taken over by their junk. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the mess, and I felt something snap inside me. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a dumping ground, and I was done letting them treat it like one. I called my grandparents that afternoon to tell them what was going on. "You've been patient long enough," my grandpa said. "If you want them out, you have every legal right. We'll back you up." Hearing him say that gave me a boost of confidence. I mean, I'd always known the house was legally mine, but having my grandpa, the guy who's always been the backbone of our family, say it out loud made it feel real. Still, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My mom wasn't just going to pack up and leave because I asked nicely. I needed a plan. My grandparents helped me go through all the paperwork from my dad's estate, just to make sure there wouldn't be any legal surprises. The lawyer confirmed what we already knew. The house was mine, and my mom had no claim to it. If I wanted to, I could issue a formal eviction notice and make them leave. But even with all that on my side, the thought of confronting her made me anxious. "You're doing the right thing," my grandma said. "You deserve to live in a place where you feel respected and cared for. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even your mother." Over the next few days, I started preparing for what I knew was going to be a battle. I cleaned up as much of the house as I could, partly because I needed something to focus on, and partly because I wanted to remind myself that this was my space. I packed up all the junk they'd left in my room and stacked it in the hallway. I cleared off my desk, rearranged my bed, and put up a couple of photos of my dad that I'd found in an old box. It felt good, like I was reclaiming a little piece of what had been taken from me, but as much as I tried to focus on the positives, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What if my mom refused to leave? What if John got involved and made things even worse? I'd seen how they ganged up on me before, turning every argument into some twisted blame game where I was always the bad guy. Still, I knew I couldn't back down. The breaking point came a week later when they got back from their vacation. I was in the living room when the front door opened and they all walked in, dragging their suitcases behind them. My mom glanced at me and said, "Hey," like she hadn't just abandoned me on my birthday. John was cracking some joke about how expensive the trip had been, and the kids were already arguing over who got to play on the TV first. I just sat there, watching them act like nothing had happened. They just didn't care. Not about me, not about the house, not about anything except themselves. That night, I finally decided I couldn't wait any longer. I walked into the kitchen where my mom was scrolling on her phone. "We need to talk," I said. She looked up, barely interested. "What's up?" I tried to sound serious. "I want you and your family to move out." Her head snapped up, and for a second she just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What are you talking about? This is my house now." "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Legally, it belongs to me, and I'm done being treated like a guest in my own home. I want you to leave." She laughed, like I just told her the dumbest joke she'd ever heard. "You can't do anything. You're just a kid. You can't kick us out. This is our home." "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "It's not. It's mine. Dad left it to me, and I have the paperwork to prove it." That's when John walked in. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between me and my mom. "He's trying to kick us out," she said. John crossed his arms and smirked. "Good luck with that, buddy. You're not going to make it on your own anyway." He pissed me off, but I tried to keep my cool. "This isn't about you," I said. "It's about me finally taking back what's mine. You have 30 days to pack up and leave. After that, I'll have no problem getting the lawyer involved." My mom stood up, her face red with anger. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "We've lived here for years. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said, my voice cold now. "You've had years to figure it out. Instead, you treated me like I didn't exist. Now I'm done." What followed was a shouting match I'll never forget. My mom called me ungrateful, selfish, every name in the book. John jumped in too, accusing me of being a spoiled brat who didn't appreciate everything they'd done for me. Then she stormed upstairs, slamming doors and yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear. John hung around, pacing the living room like he was trying to intimidate me, muttering things like, "This kid has no idea what he's doing." But I didn't back down. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed, shaking from all the adrenaline. I kept telling myself I did the right thing, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. This wasn't some minor argument. I just stood up to my own mom and told her to pack up and leave. The next morning, the tension was thick. My mom wouldn't even look at me. John kept shooting me these smug little looks like he thought I'd cave any second. The kids, who probably didn't understand what was going on, just ran around the house like usual, leaving their toys and snacks everywhere. By the time my grandparents showed up, I was about ready to lose it. My grandpa came in first, his face calm but serious, followed by my grandma, who looked like she was ready to fight someone. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending to ignore them, but I saw her glance up when my grandpa walked in. "We're here to make sure this goes smoothly," my grandpa said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Where's John?" John came in from the living room, his usual cocky grin plastered on his face. "Ah, so the cavalry's here. What's this about?" "This is about the eviction notice," my grandpa said, pulling out a stack of papers. "Legally, this house belongs to my grandson, and you and your family have 30 days to leave. This document makes it official." John's grin disappeared real quick. He grabbed the paper and skimmed it, his face turning redder with every word. "You can't be serious," he said, throwing the paper back on the counter. "This is ridiculous." "It's the law," my grandpa said firmly. That's when my mom finally spoke up. "You really want to do this?" she said, glaring at me. "You're going to throw your own mother out of her home. What kind of son are you?" The guilt hit me hard, but I refused to let it show. "It's not your home," I said quietly. "It never was. It was Dad's, and now it's mine. You've treated me like a guest here for years, and I'm done. I deserve better." Her face twisted like she couldn't decide whether to cry or yell. She went with yelling. "You piece of shit," she said. "Everything I've done for you, and this is how you repay me, after all the sacrifices I've made." "Sacrifices?" I shot back, losing my temper. "You mean like abandoning me on my birthday so you could play happy family with John? Or turning my room into a storage unit? Or acting like I don't even exist half the time?" "Yeah, thanks for all the sacrifices, Mom." The argument went on for what felt like forever. My mom tried every trick in the book, crying, yelling, cursing. John jumped in too, calling me ungrateful and saying I'd regret this decision when I realized I couldn't handle living on my own. Even the kids got involved at one point, whining about how mean I was being and how they didn't want to leave. But I held my ground. "You have 30 days, I said, cutting them off. "After that, if you're not out, I'll have no choice but to get the authorities involved. I don't want it to come to that, but I will if I have to." My grandparents backed me up every step of the way. My grandma, who's usually the sweet and quiet type, even stepped in when my mom tried to use my dad against me. "Your father would be so disappointed in you," my mom said, tears streaming down her face. "This is not what he would have wanted." "Don't you dare," my grandma said sharply. "Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate him. You've taken advantage of that boy and this house for long enough. It's time for you to move on." The rest of the day was a blur. My mom disappeared into her room, slamming the door behind her, while John muttered curses under his breath and stomped around the house like a toddler throwing a tantrum. I spent most of the afternoon with my grandparents, going over the legal process and making sure everything was airtight. That night, my uncle came over with a locksmith to change the locks on the doors. My mom didn't even come out of her room to stop him, but John stood in the doorway, watching like he wanted to pick a fight. "You really think this is going to work?" he said, crossing his arms. "You're just a kid. You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," I said, meeting his glare. "But I know one thing. I'm not going to let you treat me like crap in my own house anymore." Over the next few weeks, things got even uglier. My mom and John refused to pack up their stuff, clearly hoping I'd back down. Instead, they started making life as miserable as possible. The kids left their toys everywhere, blasting the TV at full volume every chance they got. John kept, accidentally, eating the food I bought for myself, and my mom started leaving passive-aggressive notes around the house. "You'll regret this," one of them said. "Family is all you've got." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch a wall, but instead, I called my grandparents and told them what was happening. "You're doing everything by the book," my grandpa reassured me. "They're just trying to wear you down. Don't let them." By the time the 30-day deadline rolled around, my mom and her family had finally started packing. But it was clear they weren't going quietly. On the last day, my mom gave one final try. "I hope you're happy," she said as she loaded the last box into their car. "You've torn this family apart." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching as they drove away, leaving the house and me behind. When the door finally shut, I felt a wave of relief like I'd never felt before. It didn't feel real at first. The house, for once, was completely silent. I just stood there for a few minutes, letting it sink in. For the first time in years, the house was mine. My grandparents came over not long after they left. My grandma pulled me into a hug the second she walked in. "You did it," she said, her voice full of pride. My grandpa nodded behind her. "We're proud of you, kid. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, but you did the right thing." We spent the rest of the day cleaning the house from top to bottom until we got everything back to its place. The first week after they left was peaceful, but it didn't last long. My mom wasn't the kind of person to let things go quietly. She started calling and texting me constantly, alternating between curses and outright threats. Things like, "Don't think I won't take you to court over this." At first, I ignored her, but the texts kept coming, and the things she said started to get under my skin. I wasn't doing anything wrong, I knew that. The house was legally mine, and I had every right to reclaim it. But still, the way she talked made me second-guess myself. I called my grandparents to tell them what was going on, and they immediately stepped in to help. My grandpa got in touch with the lawyer who handled my dad's estate, and we went over everything again to make sure we were on solid ground. "You're doing everything by the book," the lawyer reassured me. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on." That gave me some peace of mind, but the stress was still there. My mom wasn't just trying to get to me, she was also dragging the rest of the family into it. She started spreading rumors among my extended relatives, painting me as some heartless, ungrateful son who had thrown his own mother out onto the street. At first, I didn't even know it was happening. I started getting random texts and calls from aunts and cousins I hadn't talked to in years, all of them asking me what was going on. So I sat down with my grandparents and some of my closer relatives to explain everything. I told them about the neglect, the clutter, the way she abandoned me on my birthday. I even showed them the legal paperwork proving the house was mine. My uncle, who's always been blunt, didn't hold back. "She's been using you and this house for years," he said. "It's about time someone stood up to her." Word started spreading, and eventually the tide turned. Some relatives still believed my mom's version of events, but the ones who mattered most had my back. My uncle even confronted her at a family gathering, calling her out for the way she treated me. "You abandoned him on his birthday," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And now you're playing the victim. Give me a break." Not long after that, my mom showed up at the house unannounced. She banged on the door like she was trying to break it down. When I opened it, she launched into a full-blown rant. "Let me in," she yelled. "This is my home too. Where are we supposed to go?" I stood there, trying to stay calm. "It's not your home," I said firmly. "It's mine, legally. You've had years to figure out your situation, but instead, you treated this place like a free ride. Now it's time for you to move on." She tried to push past me, but my grandpa, who happened to be visiting that day, stepped in. That's when her tone shifted from anger to full-on rage, her face contorting like she was about to explode. "Are you freaking serious right now?" she screamed, jabbing her finger toward my grandpa. "This is your fault. You've always hated me, haven't you? You've been waiting for this moment to turn my own son against me, you old bastard." My grandpa, as calm as ever, didn't flinch. "This isn't about me," he said evenly. This is about you and the choices you've made. You've taken advantage of him and this house for long enough. It's time to move on. But she wasn't done. Move on? Move on to what, huh? A cardboard box? You think you're so high and mighty with your little speeches, but you're nothing but a bitter old man sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. My grandpa raised an eyebrow but didn't engage. You've made your bed, he said. Now you have to lie in it. That only made her more furious. She turned to me next. You're just like him, she spat, her eyes wild. A selfish, ungrateful little brat. I hope this all blows up in your face, and when it does, don't come crying to me or to your precious grandpa. She stormed down the driveway, shouting over her shoulder. And you, she yelled at my grandpa, pointing at him. You're a miserable old fool who ruined everything. I hope you're happy, you piece of crap. I stood there, my chest tight, watching her leave. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, hearing those words thrown at the one person who had always had my back. But as my grandpa put a reassuring hand on my shoulder, I reminded myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. In the weeks that followed, things finally started to settle down. My grandparents and I spent more time together, cleaning, redecorating, and turning the house into a place I could truly call home. My uncles and aunts pitched in too, helping with repairs and offering advice on how to manage everything on my own. The house wasn't just a house anymore. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could build my future and honor my dad's memory. Every time I walked through the door, I felt this deep sense of pride and gratitude. Honestly, I feel like I got some scars from all this, and not the kind you can see. I always thought turning 18 meant freedom and starting fresh, but no one ever tells you how complicated and messy it can be. I didn't expect the adult world to suck this much, and I definitely didn't expect to face all this drama just to feel like I had a place to call home. It wasn't easy, not even close. There were so many moments where I wanted to throw in the towel and let them win, just because it would have been less exhausting. But now that I've come out the other side, I can say reclaiming my home and my life was the best decision I've ever made. It feels different now when I walk through the front door. This place doesn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It feels like mine. I've been doing a lot of thinking about what comes next. For one, I've been working on turning the house into a place I can actually enjoy. And honestly, I think I deserve to celebrate after everything that happened. I want to mark this as the start of something better. I was thinking about throwing a proper birthday party, like the one I should have had in the first place. Nothing too wild, but something fun. Maybe invite some friends, cook a nice meal, and finally have a night that's all about good vibes and no drama. What do you guys think? Should I go for it? Thanks for reading, by the way. This whole experience has been a lot, but getting it all out here has been weirdly therapeutic. If you've got any thoughts or advice, drop them below. I'd love to hear what you think. And seriously, thank you for sticking with me through this. It means a lot. Story 2. My mother-in-law moved into my home, made new regulations, and even tossed away my brother's ashes, according to the title of this story. She wants to see my child now that I'm pregnant, even though I booted her out. Hello everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Have you ever encountered someone who, before you even speak, declares their hatred for you? That's Linda, a 53-year-old woman, my mother-in-law. I sensed her coldness as soon as I entered her home. Oh, you don't look like the son I imagined you to be. To be honest, I should have fled at that moment, but instead I stayed, made an effort to be kind. I'm here to tell you how desperate Linda was to ruin my life, and how I ensured that she would never do it again. Linda has been at this game from day one, so don't assume she hates me now. The moment Ryan took me home to meet her, she began to dislike me. I am Priya, a 28-year-old Indian-American woman who grew up in Chicago. For Linda, I may as well have just stepped off the boat, even though my family has been here for 4 generations. She is the kind of lady who feels her son should have a white girl who is chaste, pious, and attends church. I wasn't any of it. I met a 28-year-old man named Ryan in college. He was the affable, all-American man with the warm eyes and easy chuckle. In addition, I was the girl who could argue with anyone. We clicked right away, and we fell in love quickly after. I was anxious but hopeful when Ryan decided it was time for me to meet his mother. Although I was aware that his family was from a tiny town, I foolishly thought they would recognize me as a dedicated, caring mother who loved their kid. I was mistaken as soon as I entered her home. Although Linda was kind, her manner was cold, phony, and each phrase seemed like a test. "Oh," she replied, smiling a bit too tightly. "You're Priya. I've heard a little bit about you from Ryan. It seemed like a code for all the things I dislike about you." In any case, I tried to create a good impression by smiling. That evening's dinner was a disaster straight out of a romantic comedy. Linda asked me a lot of questions regarding my past. "What are your parents up to?" "They have a modest company, I see. It must be pleasant. Will you be going home frequently? At home?" She pretended that I hadn't said anything when I informed her that I was born here. The remarks about the cuisine followed. Linda had prepared a tasteless roast with boiling green beans and mashed potatoes. I asked for salt nicely, yet it seemed like I smacked her face. "Do you think it lacks enough flavor?" With a tone brimming with subtle hostility, she inquired. Ryan immediately defended me by claiming that my mother was just accustomed to other types of meals. Although she doesn't provide criticism, Linda wasn't finished. "You used to love this meal when Becky made it for you," she continued, turning to face Ryan. Becky was who the devil. It found out that Ryan's high school love was Becky. Blonde and vivacious, she was the ideal daughter-in-law for Linda. Becky was already married when I first met Linda. Despite this, Linda continued to treat her as though she were still a member of the family. Linda kept bringing her up. According to Becky, she just sent me the cutest card for my birthday. At the grocery store, I ran into Becky. "Tell you," she said. "Hello, Ryan." I initially dismissed it. Linda's obsession with Becky wasn't her fault. However, Linda then began to test limits. When Ryan and I were engaged, Becky texted him one day. It was sufficiently innocent. She was seeking guidance on a project at work, but I couldn't help but suspect Linda was involved. Ryan was unconcerned, but I knew Linda. She was plotting. Everything was revealed a week later. Over dinner, Linda noted in passing, "Oh, Ryan, I gave your number to Becky. I assumed you wouldn't mind because she mentioned that she wanted assistance." I was enraged. "You had no right to do that, Linda," I said, attempting to seem calm. Linda pretended to be innocent as she blinked at me. "What's so important? Becky is almost like family. She is not related." "Firmly," Ryan said. "Furthermore, you must consult Priya and me before making decisions like that." Linda sighed and shifted the conversation, but the harm had already been done. It was about control, not just about Becky. The fact that Ryan was choosing me over the life she had envisioned for him infuriated Linda. Linda didn't even act pleased when Ryan proposed. We didn't get a call from her congratulating us, never inquired about the ring, refused to assist with the wedding. Rather, she ignored our calls and pouted for weeks. She attempted to dissuade Ryan from marrying me when she did speak with him at last. She remarked, "You're hurrying into this. Getting married is a major step. Have you given it enough thought?" Ryan would have none of it. "I adore Priya, Mom. We're getting married. You have the option to sit or participate. This one is out." Linda grudgingly consented to attend our engagement celebration, but she was obviously unable to act appropriately. She arrived late, wearing black. Black, indeed. She talked to her cousins all evening about how different the wedding will be, as if she were in mourning. I heard her say to one of her pals, "I just hope Ryan knows what he's doing." At one point, it might be challenging to marry someone from such a different cultural background. I was prepared for everything Linda might throw at me by the time the wedding arrived. Or so I believed. Everything was a scene for her. The cuisine, the music, and the guest list. Does the reception really need to serve Indian food? She questioned Ryan. Shouldn't we just serve something neutral like potatoes and steak? Quickly shut that down, Ryan. This is also Priya's wedding, Mom. Finally, we are enjoying Indian cuisine. On the wedding day itself, by dressing in a lavish black gown that seemed more appropriate for a movie premiere than a family wedding, Linda attempted to outdo me. In the pictures, she declined to grin, left the reception early without saying farewell, and hardly spoke to my parents. Even though it stung, I'm not going to let her spoil my day. The only thing that mattered was that Ryan and I were married. After 3 years, I believed that the worst of it was behind us. Ryan and I had learnt to ignore Linda's passive-aggressive remarks, but she still made them every time she came to visit. Together, we were creating a nice life in our little house. Then there was the turmoil surrounding Linda's condo HOA. She had apparently been at odds with her neighbors for months, something regarding fence heights and property lines. One day, sobbing, she contacted Ryan and asked for a place to stay until she worked things out. Since Ryan is a good-hearted person, he volunteered to let her move in for a short time while she looks for another apartment. "I know it's a lot to ask, but she's my mum," he remarked. I let out a groan, already fearing what lay ahead. "Okay, but Ryan, you have to establish limits. This is not her house, it's ours." He said he would, but it's easy to make promises. Retaining them. That is a whole other matter. I knew I was in danger when Linda arrived at our house. She had already interrupted my life with her views and sense of entitlement. However, this was not like the others. She wasn't simply stopping by this time. She was relocating. Like she was getting ready for a year-long trip, her van was crammed full with boxes, bags, and other home belongings. I moaned as I peered out the window. "Tell me, Ryan, she didn't bring her whole house." Already frustrated, Ryan massaged his temples. I assured her that it was only temporary. Like she always does, she's most likely just packing too much, either temporary or not. This seemed like the start of a bad dream. As like she owned the place, Linda walked in with ease. Her gaze lingered a little too long on my baggy hoodie and leggings as she gave me a once-over. "Oh, you appear at ease, Priya." Her voice brimmed with condemnation as she spoke. "It's good to see you, Linda." I forced a grin in response. Ryan assisted her in carrying her belongings, which included 6 large suitcases, 3 fragile boxes, and a laundry basket with blankets and throw cushions. She started looking about the house right away, as if she were doing a real estate evaluation. She ran her fingers over the back of the couch and said, "You've changed the furniture since I was last here. It's contemporary. Although it's not really my style, I suppose it suits you as well." "It works." I resisted the impulse to roll my eyes as I spoke. Then she walked into the kitchen and opened drawers and cabinets without asking. "You still have that spice rack, Priya. It's really time for you to obtain something more impartial. This one is blatantly ethnic." With clenched teeth, I answered, "Because it's mine." Ryan gave me a pitying glance, but Linda didn't notice. She was too busy moving things around in my kitchen. I escorted Linda to the guest room we had set up for her after she had completed her tour of the home. With a full-sized bed, clean sheets, and a tiny desk near the window, it was compact but comfortable. "It's this." She wrinkled her nose and inquired. "This is the guest room indeed," I answered. She entered, making a leisurely round as if she were inspecting a cell in a prison. "It's really little. Are you certain there isn't anything larger?" "There isn't another room available," I remarked, attempting to seem neutral. "How about the workplace?" Pointing down the hallway, she questioned. I strongly said that we operate in the office, which is far smaller than this place. With a theatrical sigh, she collapsed on the bed. "I'll have to get a nicer mattress, but I guess I'll get by. This is really too rigid." I said that the mattress was brand new. "I'm getting tired of guests," she retorted. "Not for a long-term resident. Short-term." She was corrected by Ryan. "Mom, you're only here for a while." She disregarded him. It became evident in a matter of hours that Linda would not simply settle in peace. She began unpacking right away, putting so many of her belongings in the guest room that it appeared as though she was establishing a permanent home. She brought in a little coffee machine since evidently walking to the kitchen was too cumbersome, strung up her own drapes, and changed the bedding I had put out with her own more comfy set. However, it didn't end there. It was a habit of Linda's to treat each room as though it were her own. She would leave her mail on the kitchen counter, her shoes in the hallway, and her coffee cup on the table in the living room. She seemed to be demarcating her area. She was moving the framed pictures on our bookshelves when I walked downstairs one evening. She had shifted a wedding day photo of Ryan and me to the back of the shelf and swapped it out with a prom picture of Ryan and Becky from high school. "What are you doing, Linda?" My voice was hardly steady as I asked. "Oh," she answered with an innocent smile. "I was just cleaning up." "Don't you think this photo of Ryan and Becky is much better?" I grabbed the picture and shoved it back into the drawer where it belonged, saying, "No, I don't." "Our wedding pictures remain in their current location." Linda sighed as though I were the one who was being unreasonable. "Priya, you're really sensitive. It's only an image." "This is my house," I yelled. Almost instantly, the kitchen turned into a battlefield. My passion has always been cooking, and Ryan adores the food I make. She had an issue with everything I created, though, Linda. "Are you cooking again, Priya?" One evening, she wrinkled her nose at the scent of coriander and cumin. The scent of spices permeates the entire home. Dinner smells in the air. As I stirred the curry pot on the burner, I spoke. "Well," she responded, "perhaps you could open a window next time." "These odors shouldn't stick to the walls." When Ryan heard, he intervened. "Priya's food is fantastic, Mom. You can refuse to eat it if you don't like it." Linda appeared irritated as she crossed her arms. "All I'm trying to say is, Ryan, I'm not sure how you can cope with all that heat. Your stomach has always been so sensitive." "I don't," Ryan stated emphatically. Linda wasn't finished, though. She began recommending simpler dishes. "Reed may be blanded by me. How about preparing a simple dish like meatloaf? Or a lovely dish, perhaps? Becky used to make them, and Ryan loved them." Once more, it was there. Becky. Despite all these years, Linda was unable to stop talking about Becky. She seemed to believe that Ryan would miraculously alter his attitude about me if she talked about her enough. I was baking one day when Linda entered the kitchen while Ryan was away. Leaning on the counter, she added nonchalantly, "I saw Becky the other day." I responded, not looking up from the dough. "Good for her." I was kneading. "She's doing great," Linda said. "She just received a raise at work, and she said that she still occasionally thinks about Ryan." I stopped in mid-knead and froze my hands. "Linda, what are you trying to say?" "Oh, nothing," she answered in an unduly pleasant voice. "I simply find it admirable that she still has feelings for him. You know, she played such a significant role in his life." I turned to her after dropping the dough onto the counter. "Linda, I'm married to Ryan. Becky is married as well. She has never been and never will be a part of his life. Therefore, don't bother if you're intending to stir up trouble." After a brief moment of hesitation, Linda's smile returned. "Why you're being so defensive is beyond me. I'm simply thinking back on that evening. I told Ryan everything." He was enraged. She mentioned Becky once more. With his mouth clenched, he asked, "She did, of course. She has been attempting to discredit me ever since she arrived," I said. "I will speak with her. Ryan said he would. This is going too far." However, talking was insufficient. I was beginning to feel alienated in my own house as Linda dug her claws in. It felt like forever, even though Linda had only been living with us for a few days. Although I was aware that things would worsen before they improved, I was unaware of the extent to which she would go to undermine me. I was already on the verge of going insane when Linda made the decision to ruin my cupboard. With her, there was a new insult or passive-aggressive remark every day. She treated me like an inexperienced cleaner who had inadvertently entered her son's life and my house like a badly run hotel. Nevertheless, I made an effort to maintain harmony for Ryan's sake. I reminded myself that it was just temporary and that she would soon grow bored and go. However, what transpired that morning made it quite evident. Linda wasn't only challenging. Her goal was to completely destroy me. I felt abnormally hopeful when I woke up. Ryan loves biryani, so I was going to cook it for supper. Additionally, I had spent the previous evening marinating the chicken and preparing the seasonings. I always felt in control while I was cooking, and I needed that little win because of Linda's continual shenanigans. However, my heart fell when I entered the kitchen. All my neatly arranged shelves were empty, and the pantry door was ajar. I initially believed I was seeing things. I massaged my eyes, blinked, and opened the cabinet once again in the hopes that the spices would come out of thin air. They didn't. I've lost my rice dispenser. I kept the sacks of wheat, the jars of lentils, and even the tiny jars of dried herbs for special occasions. It was all gone. I examined the refrigerator in panic. The tale was the same. I had stocked up on veggies, yogurt, and paneer, but it was all gone. A loaf of bread, some eggs, a stick of butter, and a carton of milk were all that remained. The realization struck me, and I stood still. My kitchen had been wiped out. A few minutes later, still half sleeping, Ryan walked into the kitchen. "Good morning," he stated as he picked up a coffee mug. "Are you all right? You appear pallid. The food is all gone." My voice trembled as I asked. Ryan scowled while examining the refrigerator and pantry. "I don't know. Was it moved before I could respond?" With her coffee cup in hand, Linda entered the room as if she hadn't already broken into my pantry. She grinned as she glanced at Ryan and then at me. "Oh, you noticed," she murmured, as if she were anticipating appreciation. "Have you noticed anything?" I lost my temper. I tidied up the kitchen. Putting down her cup, she spoke. "Everything you had, including those strange spices and other items. It simply wasn't appropriate. That type of meal is unfamiliar to Ryan." I decided it was time to make a new beginning. Ryan's mouth fell open. "What did you do?" Linda gave a shrug. I tossed it aside. In addition to taking up a lot of room, the scent was rather overwhelming. "You may now buy regular groceries." "Typical groceries?" I said, raising my voice. "That was food worth hundreds of dollars, Linda. How long did it take me to stock all of that, do you know?" Not even Linda flinched. "Oh, Priya, stop being so theatrical. More can be purchased. In addition, I've already compiled a list of the goods we truly require. Chicken breasts, canned soup, and potatoes. Real food, you know." Ryan interrupted, his tone piercing. "You had no right to handle any of that, Mom. Priya's kitchen is this. What were you contemplating?" "I was considering your well-being." With her arms crossed, she spoke. "Those spices, all of them, what they're doing to your gut is unknown. All I'm doing is watching out for you." "You're not," Ryan retorted. "Again, you're treating Priya disrespectfully." However, Linda wasn't paying attention. In this case, she had already determined that she was the victim, and she was not going to change her mind no matter what we said. Linda confessed, and I raced out of the home. I instructed Ryan to stay and deal with his mother, even though he offered to accompany me to the grocery shop. To be honest, I didn't trust myself to be polite to her at that moment, so I needed to calm down. My mood didn't get any better at the grocery shop. My aggravation grew as I made my way down the aisles. None of the spices, lentils, or bags of basmati rice were present. Linda had thrown some out, and I had to replace them. Even if canned groceries and frozen dinners were plenty on the stores, things weren't the same. The fact that some of those things were irreplaceable just made it worse. I couldn't just buy several of the ingredients Linda had thrown out at the neighborhood grocery store. During my parents' and friends' visits from India, I received the majority of the masala, dry herbs, and specialty foods. Every time my mother visited, she brought a care package for me, packed with pickles, dried red chilies, and handmade spice mixes. I was unable to locate it. They were more than simply food. They represented fragments of home, little reminders of my origins, even though I was able to locate several Indian components nearby. Every time, it was a pain. The closest Indian supermarket was more than an hour distant, and their inventory fluctuated. I occasionally make the long commute just to discover that they are out of asafoetida, or turmeric. Additionally, I had to rely on internet retailers when I was unable to travel, which came with expensive shipping costs and the uncertainty of whether the things would arrive fresh. My mom sent me a little container of garam spice last year, and I pondered about it. It was a spice combination of her own creation. She ground herself and toasted. Like a can of paprika, Linda had most likely thrown it in the garbage without giving it any attention. It was more than simply an ingredient in the container. My mother gave it to me as a present. She knew I couldn't duplicate it here, so she crafted it with love. As I pushed my cart through the store, I could feel my throat constricted. How could someone have such a lack of consideration? Was Linda even aware of the damage she caused? Or did she simply not give a damn? I took hold of what I could: a loaf of bread, some spaghetti, and canned tomatoes. However, it was very different from the colorful, tasty dishes I was accustomed to preparing. It seemed more than simply a hassle when my go-to items were not available. I felt as though a piece of myself had been removed. Linda was reading a magazine on the couch when I arrived home. As I passed her carrying the groceries, she didn't even raise her head. "Have you gotten all you require?" In a casual manner, she questioned, as if she hadn't just destroyed my kitchen. "No," I responded bluntly. "You'll manage, I'm sure." As she turned a page, she said, "You're resourceful." I walked upstairs to cool up after slamming the pantry door. Ryan and I had a conversation that evening. He could see she needed to go, and I was still furious. "Without trying to sugarcoat things," I said. With a groan, Ryan combed through his hair. "I am aware that what she did was totally inappropriate, Priya. It's unacceptable. I've told her already. The groceries aren't the only thing at stake." My voice trembled as I spoke. "Ryan, she doesn't respect me. She has been upfront about it from the beginning, and now she is acting as though I am a visitor in my own house." Ryan gave a nod. "You're correct. She has gone too far too often. Tomorrow I'll give Lisa a call to see if she can take her in." Lisa, a woman of 32. Linda had been invited to stay with his sister when the whole thing began. However, Linda had declined. "My buddies are too far away." At the time, she had stated, "She can't remain here then." I spoke aggressively. "Not after this." Ryan sat Linda down for a serious conversation the next morning. In order to avoid being involved in the dispute, I remained upstairs. I was able to hear some of what they were saying, but not all of it. "Mom, you can't simply discard someone else's meal. It's not your home. You must be mindful of our personal space. You'll have to go if you can't." With each phrase, Linda's voice became louder. "I was only attempting to assist," she yelled. "And you're kicking me out now? Following everything that I have done for you." Ryan remained composed yet resolute. "Mom, we won't toss you out. Lisa has already expressed her happiness in having you. There is no question about it." Linda was furious at the conclusion of the talk. She shut the door to her bedroom and stayed inside the remainder of the day. Ryan and I sat down to a straightforward supper of canned soup and spaghetti that evening. It was sufficient, even if it wasn't what I had intended. Ryan reached for my hand and murmured, "I'm sorry you had to deal with this. I swear that this won't occur once again." I gave a nod. Although I was appreciative of his help, I knew deep down that Linda wouldn't pass away peacefully. She didn't. To put it mildly, the days ahead would be fascinating. Linda had more than simply entitlement. She was vindictive. What started off as a furious assault of my kitchen turned into something I never imagined even she could do. I was exhausted from the pantry incident, but I made an effort to overlook it for Ryan's sake. Then, a few days later, something occurred that completely altered the situation. In our living room, I had a little, exquisitely carved wooden box on the mantel. It held the ashes of my older brother, Arjun, who died 5 years ago in a vehicle accident. The most difficult thing my family and I had ever gone through was losing him, and it was comforting to have that little bit of him around me. Though basic, the box held great meaning for me. My parents had given it to me as a token of their appreciation for Arjun. They had given me some of his ashes to keep near, as they knew I couldn't regularly visit his grave. I discovered the box was missing one evening while cleaning the living room. Thinking it could have been pushed aside, I looked at the mantel, but it wasn't there. I started to panic as I looked on the coffee table, the bookshelf, and even the floor. "Ryan." With a trembling voice, I shouted out, "The box is where?" "The mantel-mounted one." Ryan frowned as he entered the room. "Which box?" "The one that contained Arjun's ashes." I said, "My heart is racing." His expression dropped. I'm not sure. It ought to be present. Linda entered at that moment, drinking her tea nonchalantly. Why all the commotion? With a very unimpressed expression, she questioned. There is no box containing my brother's ashes. I turned to her and spoke. Did you see it? Her face remained unchanged. That old stuff, huh? I assumed it was some sort of ornamental item. While dusting, I relocated it. Perhaps one of the drawers contains it. I looked in every drawer, shelf, every nook and cranny of the space. Nothing. Linda. My voice shook with rage as I spoke. What location is it? This goes beyond just adornment. It's the ashes of my brother, if it was moved. Tell me the location. She pretended to be innocent as she stared at me. Really, Priya, I have no idea. Perhaps you lost it. Lost it. I said it again, raising my voice. Linda. Nothing was lost by me. It's gone now, but it was on the mantel. Have you thrown it away? She put on her phony grin after her face stiffened for a while. Why would I do that? It's really theatrical of you. It will appear somewhere, I'm sure. However, it didn't. I had trouble sleeping that night. Nothing Ryan said could make up for what had been lost, despite his best efforts to console me. I had a visceral feeling that Linda had thrown the package away out of malice. Her attempts to eradicate my cuisine and customs were insufficient. She desired to remove me from existence. Ryan addressed her mother the following morning. Have you disposed of the ashes of Priya's brother? Linda let out a gasp and clenched her chest as if the idea were offensive. How could you say such a terrible thing about me? I would never act in that way. So where is it? Ryan applied pressure. I'm not sure. She lost her temper. Priya may not have as excellent of a recall as she believes. The last straw for us both was her unwillingness to confess. Ryan and I had a conversation that evening. I had never seen him so furious. I know she did it, Priya. I know she must go, but she will never acknowledge it. I spoke aggressively. I can't live like this, Ryan. Someone who disrespects me is not someone I can live with. My family, my culture. Someone who would ruin something that valuable. Ryan gave a nod. She is no longer there. Tomorrow I'll give Lisa a call and tell her to come collect Mom. If she declines to visit Lisa, we'll figure something other out. She's not going to remain here, though. One more day. The news did not sit well with Linda. In an attempt to guilt-trip him by bringing up his early years, she said that we had abandoned her and were unappreciative of everything she had done for Ryan. Ryan, however, remained steadfast. Mom, you've gone too far, he remarked. Family is no longer the focus of this. Respect is at issue, and you haven't displayed any. By the end of the week, you must depart. Linda had left. In an effort to get rid of the stress and poison she had brought with her, Ryan and I cleaned the house for hours. However, her acts had left scars, even if she was no longer physically present. I was troubled by the loss of my brother's ashes. Each time I passed the mantel, I had a pain in my chest. Ryan did everything he could to comfort me, but nothing could repair the harm Linda had done. The day Linda left our home, she moved in with Ryan's sister, Lisa. God bless her. Lisa didn't know what she was getting herself into. She had heard tidbits of what had transpired, but she thought it was just normal family drama. She was not yet aware of the extent of Linda's avarice and hatred. We didn't hear from Linda at first. No attempts to get in touch. No texts, no calls. I felt a sense of relief. I didn't want to listen to her make-believe or justifications. But I knew Linda, too. She didn't like to be silent. She was too arrogant to remain silent indefinitely, but she was also too obstinate to acknowledge her mistakes. We received a call around 2 weeks after Linda and Lisa moved in together, but it wasn't from Linda. Lisa sent it. Can I speak with you, Priya? Lisa sounded uncertain, as if she wasn't sure how to start. Of course, I said. My heart is sinking. After a lengthy silence, Lisa resumed her conversation. I believe you should know what Mom told me. I prepared myself. What is it? She acknowledged that she had thrown out the box containing your brother's ashes. Lisa spoke haltingly, seeming as though she was having trouble pronouncing the words. I tightened my hold on the phone as I froze. What is she? She claimed to have done it intentionally. Lisa went on, her voice full of disdain. The fact that you and Ryan were forcing her to go disturbed her. She believed that by refusing to let her remain in your house, you were being disrespectful to her. She therefore made the decision to speak up. My palms curled into fists, and my heart thumped. In some sort of retaliation, she tossed away my brother's ashes. With each syllable, my voice rose as I begged. Yes, Lisa answered, trembling. After cleaning the cupboard, she informed me. Despite her desire to harm you, she claimed to know what the box was. She believed that kicking her out would teach you a lesson. My breath came in short gasps, and I could feel the blood in my veins boiling. Desecrate my brother's remains and teach me a lesson. Could she? How could somebody act in such a horrible way? Lisa's voice broke. I'm not sure, Priya. What's wrong with her is beyond me. I was unable to even look at her when she informed me. She dismissed my comment that she was repulsive as if it were insignificant. She is a monster. My voice trembled with anger as I spoke. Thank you for letting me know, Lisa, but I don't want to ever interact with her again. I think she's dead. Lisa let out a sigh. I get it. In addition, I don't believe she should be pardoned for this. There is no forgiveness for what she did. After saying thank you, I hung up and sat quietly. Linda's brutality was weighing heavily on me. This went beyond simply crossing a queue. It was the height of treachery. Not only had Linda treated me disrespectfully, my sorrow, my culture, and my family were all desecrated by her. There was no way out of this. Slowly, life started to go on. Ryan and I concentrated on repairing our relationship and our house. Eliminating Linda from our life just strengthened us since we were stronger than before. Then, a few months later, an amazing event took place. I discovered I was expecting a child. I was elated at the news, something I hadn't experienced in years. Ryan was overjoyed, and we spoke for hours about nursery designs, baby names, and the types of parents we wanted to be. The future seemed bright for the first time in a long time. At first, we chose to keep the pregnancy a secret. I only told my family and a select group of close friends about the news. I wanted Linda to know nothing, at least not yet. I was prepared for her eventual effort to re-enter our life, but I also knew how she would respond. Sadly, secrets aren't kept that way for very long. Linda somehow learnt of the pregnancy. I don't blame Lisa for letting it slip, but I assume she did so during one of their chats. Linda has a knack for extracting information from others. An email was the first indication of problems. I just received the amazing news, dear Ryan and Priya. I'm ecstatic to have grandchildren. Tell me how I may be of assistance during this wonderful time, please. I would be delighted to visit and discuss the infant. Mom. Love. I didn't reply. Therefore, I erased the email. Ryan shook his head after reading it over my shoulder. She's incredible, he whispered. The emails evolved into texts, which were followed by phone conversations. Linda tried everything, including playing the victim, apologizing, and guilt trips. In one message, she remarked, "Since I moved out, I've been so lonely. For the baby's sake, can't we simply get over this? After all, I'm still Ryan's mother." However, I couldn't forgive Linda for what she had done. Disrespect was not the only reason I threw away my brother's ashes. That was a horrible deed. I could go on with my life, but I couldn't allow her to re-enter it. Linda's efforts to re-establish contact grew increasingly urgent as my pregnancy went on. Baby clothing, toys, and even a blanket she claimed to have hand-knitted, albeit one that still had the price tag on it, were among the items she sent home. We sent everything back unopened. Linda unexpectedly knocked on our home one evening. I remained hidden in the living room while Ryan responded. "Why have you come here, Mom?" Ryan's voice was icy as he inquired. Linda responded, "I just wanted to see you." "What about Priya and the infant? The hump, I suppose." "We don't have you here," Ryan replied firmly. "You must go." However, Linda's voice cracked as she continued, "I'm your mother. I can't be excluded from my grandchild's life." Ryan didn't falter. When you tossed away the ashes of Priya's sibling, you closed yourself off. The final straw was that. We're finished. Mom. Ryan refused to back down despite Linda's attempts to persuade. She eventually departed, but not before crying. One more instance of guilt tripping. We kept the birth of our daughter, Maya, a secret from Linda. Eventually, she learned, most likely from Lisa. However, we were aware of our limits at that point. Maya would be raised in a household that valued compassion, love, and respect, rather than poison and deceit. Over the years, Linda made a few more attempts to get back in touch, but we never allowed her to. Some injuries are too severe. Furthermore, it's not always feasible to forgive. Rather, we concentrated on creating a life that reflected the principles we held dear. Despite the fact that Maya will never meet her uncle Arjun, I made sure she knew about him as a child. Stories, pictures, and a new box on the mantel, this time with letters and recollections, helped us preserve his memory. A remembrance of the sibling I lost but will always remember, and as I observed Maya's development, I knew we had made the proper decision since we were surrounded by affection and no longer under Linda's shadow. Not all relationships are worth repairing, and sometimes the finest starts are the ends. Story 3. This story is titled, Stepsister Moved Into My Home, Got Pregnant, and Said She'll Be Taking Over My Room for Nursery. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here I am venting on Reddit because I have no idea what to do anymore. I, 21 male, live in a house I inherited from my grandmother about 2 years ago. It's not some giant mansion, but it's a decent-sized 2-story house, and I'm proud of it. It was left to me specifically in her will, because I took care of her toward the end, and she wanted me to have a stable place to live. To help with expenses, I rent out rooms to 3 friends of mine, Jack, 19, M. Kim, 18F, and NE 18F. I've known Jack and Kim since high school, and NE is someone Kim introduced me to who needed a room. They're good people, and living with them has been easy. We've had no drama, just a simple roommate dynamic. We all respect the house, split the chores, and hold little monthly meetings to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then there's Susan, 22. F. Susan is my stepsister. Now, let me preface this by saying, Susan and I have never been particularly close. My dad remarried when I was 14, and Susan was already 15 at the time. She's my stepmom's daughter from a previous relationship. She's always been a little entitled, but for the most part we tolerated each other while we lived under the same roof. Then our parents moved overseas for my dad's job, and I thought I'd finally get some peace. I was wrong 3 years ago, while my grandmother was still alive. Susan asked if she could move in for just a year to finish up her schooling. At the time, my grandmother was still healthy, and she liked the idea of having more family around, so she agreed. Susan moved in, and at first everything was fine, but then she dropped out of school. She claimed it was too stressful, but from what I saw, it was more about the fact that she met her now boyfriend, Mike, 20:08 a.m. Mike is one of those guys who thinks he knows everything about everything. He's loud, opinionated, and not exactly the most responsible person. I've overheard him say things like, "Why does a woman need to go to college? That's a waste of money." And let me tell you, Susan eats that crap up. My grandma didn't like Mike at all, and she made it clear Susan's arrangement was only temporary. But my grandma passed away not long after, and Susan stayed. At first I let her because I didn't want to deal with drama. I was grieving, and it felt like too much to handle. Susan told me she'd pay rent and help out, so I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. It wasn't at first. Fast forward to 5 months ago. Susan sat us all down and announced that she's pregnant. I didn't know how to feel about it. I mean, it's her life, and I'm not going to judge her choices. But what I didn't realize at the time is that this baby was going to become my problem. At first, she told us she was planning to move in with Mike soon. She said they were looking at apartments together, and she wouldn't be here long term. Honestly, I thought that sounded great for her. She'd have her own place to raise the baby, and Mike could finally step up and be the responsible boyfriend she swears he is. But weeks turned into months, and there was no movement. Mike still has his dingy apartment, but apparently it's too small for a baby, and they can't afford anything bigger. Meanwhile, Susan started acting like my house was suddenly her house. At first, the changes were small. She started bringing home baby stuff like a stroller, a crib, and piles of baby clothes and just stacking it in her room. That's her space. So I didn't care. But then she started talking about baby-proofing the house, which made me nervous. I'll admit I didn't shut her down right away. I thought, okay, making the house safer isn't a big deal. We'd all talk about it at one of our monthly meetings and figure out a fair plan. But Susan wasn't waiting for that. She started redecorating. Out of nowhere. I came home one day to find these tacky floral curtains hanging in the living room and a couple of cheap turtle statues on the hallway shelf. I was annoyed, but calm. I took them down and quietly put everything back in Susan's room. I told her that while I appreciated her trying to make the house homey, the common areas weren't her space to change. Well, she lost it. She started yelling about how I was being controlling and unsupportive. She said the house felt stuffy and like an old lady's home. Yeah, it was my grandmother's house. I reminded her that she could decorate her own room however she wanted, but I wanted the shared spaces to stay as they were. And here's the kicker. She then asked if she could paint her room orange. I told her no. First of all, the house is mine, and I don't want the walls ruined. Second, I'm renting to other people, and I can't just let everyone paint their rooms however they want. Susan exploded. She blamed her outburst on hormones and stormed off. But things got icy after that. Over the next few weeks, Susan kept making little comments under her breath. She complained to Mike, who of course backed her up, and suddenly I became the bad guy for not letting her prepare for the baby properly. Mike even had the nerve to tell me I was being selfish because Susan's going to be a mother. I ignored it. I thought, okay, she's hormonal, stressed, and she'll calm down. But oh boy, I was so wrong. All right, here's where things started to spiral. After the whole redecorating drama, Susan and I weren't exactly on speaking terms. She was giving me the cold shoulder most of the time, but when she did talk, it was either complaining or passive-aggressive comments about how I don't care about family. I just ignored her and kept doing my thing, hoping she'd chill out eventually. One afternoon, Susan knocked on my door. Rare because she usually just barged in when she wanted to talk. She asked if we could sit down and have a real conversation. I was skeptical, but I agreed. I thought maybe she was finally ready to talk like an adult. We sat at the kitchen table, and at first Susan was calm. She started by saying she's really stressed about the baby coming, and how she doesn't feel prepared. She mentioned how hard it's been to find an apartment with Mike and how the rent in our area is ridiculous. Honestly, I felt for her. I get that having a kid when you're unprepared is a nightmare. Then she hit me with, I've been thinking, and I have a solution that works for everyone. I should have known where this was going. Susan leaned forward like she was sharing a big secret and said, I want to move into your room. For context, my room is the master bedroom, and it's the biggest in the house. It has an attached office space that I use for my small online business, basically my livelihood. Susan explained that the office would be perfect as a nursery, and she and the baby really need the extra space. I stared at her for a second because I genuinely thought she was joking. She wasn't. I told her straight up, no. Susan blinked at me like I had just spoken a foreign language. What do you mean, no? You don't even need all that space. You're just one person. I told her I do need the space. I use the office to work, and I wasn't about to give up my room. Just because she decided to have a baby. It's not like I forced her into this situation. She looked at me like I was being unreasonable and said, but it makes sense. It's better for everyone. I asked her how exactly it was better for me. And she said, because you'll be helping your sister when she needs you most. At this point, I was done playing nice. I reminded her that she's renting one room. That's it. She doesn't get to dictate who lives where in my house. Her response? But Jack and Kim are younger than me, and they don't need their rooms. When one of them moves out, the baby can take their room. Why are you being so selfish? I had to take a second to process what I was hearing. Not only was she trying to take my room, but now she was making plans for other people's rooms too. The entitlement was off the charts. I told her Jack and Kim weren't going anywhere, and even if they did, she still wouldn't be getting their rooms, because that's not how any of this works. Susan started crying at this point. Big dramatic tears. I can't believe you're doing this to me. You know I don't have anywhere else to go. I reminded her that she and Mike were already looking for an apartment, and if Mike cared so much about her and the baby, he should be the one making sacrifices. Not me. That's when she lost it. She started yelling, saying I was heartless and selfish for not helping my family in a time of need. She accused me of prioritizing strangers, Jack and Kim, over my own stepsister. I stayed calm and told her that I wasn't going to let her guilt me into doing something I didn't want to do. I told her this house was my home, and that if she didn't like the arrangement, she could find somewhere else to live. That's when she dropped her trump card. Our parents. She got up, wiped her face, and said, "Fine, I'll talk to Dad and Mom. I'm sure they'll agree that you're being completely unreasonable." I didn't respond. I just let her storm off and slammed the door to her room. A few hours later, my phone started blowing up. My dad was calling. My stepmom was texting, and both of them were clearly on Susan's side. I finally picked up when my dad called for the third time. "Your sister called us in tears," he started. "Why are you being so cruel to her?" I tried to explain the situation calmly. I told him that Susan wanted to take my room, that she was acting like the house belonged to her, and that Mike moving in wasn't an option because of how disrespectful he's been in the past. But my dad wasn't having it. "She's pregnant, son. She's vulnerable right now. Can't you just help her out? You don't need all that space. It's not a big deal." At this point, I was getting frustrated. I reminded him that this is my house, and Susan has no right to make demands. I also told him that letting Mike move in would only create more problems. My dad just sighed and said, "Family comes first. Always. You're her brother. You need to do the right thing." That phrase, "the right thing," pissed me off. I asked him, "Why is it always my responsibility to clean up Susan's mess? She chose to get pregnant. She's choosing to stay here instead of figuring out a real solution. Why is that my problem?" My dad got quiet for a second and then said, "I'm disappointed in you." That stung. I'm not going to lie, but I stood my ground. I told him Susan wasn't getting my room, and if she and Mike didn't like the living situation, they could figure something else out. I hung up before he could respond. After that call, I felt drained. My parents were completely on Susan's side, and I knew she'd be using that as ammo. She didn't say a word to me for the rest of the night, but I could hear her talking to Mike on the phone, probably trashing me. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. It said, "I hope you're happy. Mom and Dad agree that you're a selfish jerk. I'll be talking to a lawyer about my rights to live here." A lawyer. Seriously? I knew Susan was dramatic, but this was a new level. At that point, I decided I needed to get ahead of this. If Susan wanted to play hardball, I was going to be ready. After Susan's dramatic threat about talking to a lawyer, I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for her to pull something. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not dumb either. This is my house, legally, and she has no claim to it. Still, I wanted to cover all my bases before things got worse, because I knew Susan wasn't going to let this go quietly. I called my uncle, who's pretty level-headed, about these kinds of things. He knows the family dynamic, and has always been one of the few people who doesn't blindly take Susan's side, just because she cries about something. Luckily for me, my uncle has a close friend who works in property law. So we set up a meeting for the next day. I also brought Jack and Kim with me for moral support because they've been living through this chaos, too. Annie couldn't come since she had work, but she was updated and just as fed up as the rest of us. The lawyer was an older guy who looked like he'd seen it all. After I explained the situation, how Susan's living here month to month, her wanting my master bedroom, her threats, and everything else, he kind of just sat back and said, "You've got nothing to worry about." He laid it all out clearly for me. "Susan has no legal claim to the house. It's mine. She's living here month to month. which means I can give her proper notice to move out at any time. She doesn't have a written lease, and verbal agreements can only go so far in court. The lawyer also said that while I couldn't evict her on the grounds of being pregnant, which I would never do anyway because I'm not a monster, I could evict her for breaking house rules. And boy did she break them. Here's where things got interesting. Jack and Kim finally opened up about things Susan had been doing behind my back. They didn't want to stir the pot before, but now that the situation had escalated, they felt like I needed to know. First off, Susan had apparently been making snide, homophobic comments to Jack. Jack's openly gay, and Susan knows this, but I guess she thought it was okay to mutter things like, "This is a phase," or "real men don't act like that" whenever they cross paths. Jack said he didn't want to make a big deal about it, but it clearly bothered him. Then Kim told me about how Susan had been barging into her room without knocking. Susan kept borrowing things without asking: makeup, clothes, even food. The final straw for Kim was when Susan ruined a load of her laundry. Kim's pretty sure Susan did it out of pettiness because the clothes weren't just mixed up. They were completely trashed. Hearing this made me even angrier than I already was. Susan was treating everyone in the house like we were just inconveniences she could walk all over. This wasn't just my problem anymore. It was affecting my roommates, and I wasn't about to let it continue. After the lawyer reassured me that I had every legal right to give Susan notice, I asked what steps I needed to take. He said the key was to document everything. So when I got home that night, I sent Susan a formal notice by email and text. "Hi, Susan. This is your official notice that I will not be renewing your month-to-month agreement. You have 30 days to make arrangements to leave the property. If you'd like to discuss this further, I'm available to talk tomorrow." I wasn't trying to be rude or antagonistic. I just wanted it to be clear and professional. Next, I called a locksmith. I had already been planning to change the locks for unrelated reasons. There's some old baggage with an ex who still had a key, so I figured it was a good time to just lock everything down and make the house more secure. The locksmith came that same evening and replaced all the locks on the front door and bedroom doors. I also had a lock added to the living room door and garage because I wasn't about to let Susan or Mike snoop around where they didn't belong. The kitchen, bathroom, and Susan's room were left accessible to her because that's all her agreement entitles her to. Just to cover myself, I texted Susan one more time. Period. "Hi. The locks have been changed for security reasons. Your key is available for pickup. Let me know when you'll come by and I'll make sure you get it." No response. That night, Susan didn't come home. I knew she was with Mike. Honestly, I was relieved. I didn't want to deal with her storming into the house and throwing another tantrum. What I did get, though, was another call from my dad. "Why are you locking your sister out of her home? Do you realize how cruel you're being?" I calmly explained to him that Susan wasn't locked out. Her key was ready for her to pick up, and I had texted her multiple times about it. My dad didn't seem to care about that part. "She's pregnant, for God's sake. How can you be so heartless to your family?" At this point, I was done arguing. I told him Susan has 30 days to find somewhere else to go. I've been more than reasonable. She's broken house rules, disrespected me and my roommates, and made living here miserable. I'm not going to let her take over my house just because she thinks she can guilt me into it. My dad started going on about how family comes first and how disappointed he was in me, but I just ended the call. There was nothing left to say. It's been a day since all this went down, and Susan still hasn't shown up to get her key. I've texted her a couple more times to let her know what's available, but she's ignoring me. My guess is that she's staying at Mike's and probably trying to figure out her next move. I'm not looking forward to the moment she comes back, because I know there's going to be a scene. Susan's not the type to go quietly, and I'm sure she's already spinning some story to my parents about how I'm the villain. But here's the thing. I'm done feeling guilty about this. She's my stepsister, not my responsibility. She made her choices, and I'm not about to let her steamroll me, my roommates, and my life because of those choices. I'm prepared for whatever happens next. If she wants to drag this out, I've got the lawyer's advice to back me up if she wants to keep our parents on her side. So be it. I know I'm doing the right thing for myself and my home, eat. It took 3 days. 3 blissful, Susan-free days, where the house was peaceful, and nobody had to tiptoe around her tantrums or deal with her passive-aggressive remarks. I knew it wouldn't last forever, though. Susan's not the type to let things go, and I could feel the impending storm hanging over the house like a dark cloud on the evening of the 3rd day. I was in the living room with Jack and Kim watching TV when we heard Susan's car pull into the driveway. The 3 of us exchanged looks because we all knew exactly what was coming. The front door rattled, and then there was a loud, frustrated pounding. "Are you serious? You changed the locks. Let me in." Susan's voice was loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. I grabbed her new key, walked to the door, and opened it to find Susan standing there with Mike behind her, looking smug as always. Susan looked furious. Her face was flushed. Her eyes were red and she was holding her stomach dramatically, like she was trying to emphasize her pregnancy. "Here's your key," I said as calmly as I could, holding it out to her. She snatched it out of my hand and shoved past me into the house. Mike tried to follow, but I stepped in front of him. "Where do you think you're going?" I asked. "Into the house," he said, his tone casual, like he owned the place number. "You're not welcome here," I said firmly. "This is still my house." And Susan agreed. "Doesn't call you?" "Oh my God, you're being ridiculous. He's here to help me carry my stuff upstairs. You're going to make a pregnant woman do it herself." Jack and Kim were watching from the living room, and I could feel their silent support. I wasn't about to let Mike get his foot in the door because, knowing him, he'd just stay for a few nights and never leave. "I'll help you carry your things," I told her, ignoring Mike completely. Susan groaned dramatically. "You're being impossible. This is our house too. You know our house," I repeated, trying not to lose my cool number. "It's my house. You rent a room here. You don't get to bring your boyfriend in whenever you want, and you don't get to call the shots." Susan turned back to Mike and waved him off. "Fine. Just wait in the car. I'll deal with this." Mike muttered something under his breath, probably an insult, but he left. Susan stomped up the stairs to her room and I followed, ready to carry her stuff so we could avoid another argument. He saw at her, but once we got into her room, it became obvious what she'd been doing the past few days. The place was crammed with baby supplies, bags of diapers, a crib still in its box, baby clothes, blankets, bottles. Half of it wasn't even unpacked. I couldn't help myself. "You bought all this stuff, but you still haven't found somewhere to live." Susan ignored me and dropped into her chair. "Mike and I are still looking. It's not easy finding a place that's affordable and big enough for the baby." I took a deep breath because I knew where this was going. "Susan, you have 30 days. I gave you notice. You're going to have to figure this out." She stared at me, her expression going cold. "Do you know how much of a jerk you're being? You have plenty of room here. I'm family. I'm pregnant. And instead of helping me, you're kicking me out onto the street." "You're not being kicked out," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You've had months to figure this out. And instead of doing that, you've been arguing with me about paint colors and decorations. I'm not responsible for fixing this for you." Susan stood up, and I swear I thought she was going to throw something. "You don't even need this house. You're just one person. Grandma wouldn't want you to throw me out like this." At that, I lost it a little. "Don't bring Grandma into this. You know she didn't want Mike here. She didn't let you redecorate when she was alive. So don't act like I'm being unreasonable. You've taken advantage of every ounce of kindness I've shown you, and I'm done." Susan started crying, full-on sobbing as she sat back down. "I can't believe you're treating me like this. I'm pregnant. What kind of brother does this to his sister?" The crying wasn't working this time. I was done feeling guilty. "You have 30 days, I repeated. "If you need help moving your stuff out, I'll help you. But you're not staying here, and Mike is never moving in." Susan didn't respond, but she spent the rest of the evening slamming doors and stomping around the house. Mike came back later to pick her up, and they left without another word. I could tell she was plotting something because Susan's the type who doesn't go down without a fight. Later that night, my dad called. "Susan told me what happened," he said, his tone accusatory right off the bat. Of course she'd called him. I wasn't even surprised. She told you the part where she's been breaking house rules, treating Jack and Kim like crap and demanding my room. Or did she leave that out? My dad sighed. She's stressed. Son, she's pregnant, and you need to be more understanding. You're throwing her out when she has nowhere else to go. I gave her 30 days notice. I said as calmly as I could. She's had plenty of time to figure this out. She's not my responsible. She's an adult. And so is Mike. They can sort this out together. She's your family, he shot back. You're supposed to help your family. I've been helping her for years. I said this house is mine, and I'm not letting her take advantage of me anymore. We went back and forth for a while, but it was clear my dad wasn't listening to me. He ended the call by saying he was disappointed and that I was acting selfish. I hung up and sat in silence for a while, trying to process everything points after Susan's dramatic text about talking to a lawyer. I knew she wasn't bluffing about trying to make my life miserable. She's always been the type to escalate situations when she doesn't get her way. And with Mike involved, I knew things were going to get messy. 2 days passed after the last meltdown, and the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Jack, Kim, and I were all on edge, but we were trying to live our lives as normally as possible. Susan hadn't come back yet, which was fine by all of us. I figured she was still staying at Mike's and stewing about what to do next. I was wrong. On the third morning, I woke up to Jack banging on my door at 7 a.m. "Mike's here," he said, looking angry and still half asleep. "He's in the driveway and he's unloading stuff. I think he's trying to move in." At first I thought Jack was joking because I couldn't imagine even Mike being that bold. But when I looked out the window, sure enough, there he was, dragging a mattress out of the back of his beat-up truck like he was about to set up camp. I was so stunned. I almost laughed. Almost. I threw on some clothes, grabbed my phone, and stormed outside. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded as I walked up to Mike. He looked at me like I was the one who was out of line. "Susan told me I could move my stuff in." "You didn't seriously think you could keep me out, did you?" I was so angry I felt like I could explode. "First off, Susan doesn't own this house. I do. Second, you're not moving in. Period. Take your stuff and leave, or I'm calling the cops." Mike smirked and leaned on the mattress like he had all the time in the world. "You're going to call the cops on the father of your sister's baby. Nice. Real classy." I pulled out my phone right in front of him and dialed the non-emergency police number. "Watch me." Mike smirked, disappeared. Okay, chill out." He threw his hands up in mock surrender. "No need to get dramatic. I'll leave for now." I watched as he loaded the mattress back into the truck, all while muttering insults under his breath. Once he was done, he slammed the door to his truck, pointed a finger at me, and said, "This isn't over, man. You're screwing over your own family, and it's going to come back to bite you." I ignored him. I wasn't about to argue with someone who thought threatening me was a good idea. I stayed outside until he finally drove off. Jack, who'd been standing near the porch the whole time, let out a low whistle. "I didn't think he'd actually try to pull that," Jack said. "What was he even thinking?" "Honestly, I don't think he was thinking," I replied. "He probably figured he could just bully his way in, like always." About an hour later, Susan texted me. "What the hell is wrong with you? You called the police on Mike? He was just trying to help me move in." I didn't even bother to respond. Mike wasn't moving in. End of story. But Susan wasn't done. A couple of hours later, I heard her car pull up. I braced myself as she walked through the door, slamming it behind her. She was holding some papers in her hand and looked like she was ready for a fight. "What's this?" she demanded, shoving the papers at me. I looked them over and I swear I almost laughed. They were random internet printouts about tenant rights and eviction laws. I handed them back to her. "Susan, this doesn't apply to you. I already talked to a lawyer. You're month to month, I gave you proper notice. You don't have a leg to stand on." Her face turned red. "Mike says I do have rights, and you can't just throw a pregnant woman out. I'm family and this is our home." I had to take a deep breath to keep from yelling. "Susan, I'm done explaining this to you. You've broken house rules, disrespected me and my roommates, and now Mike's trying to move in behind my back. You have 30 days. That's it." She stared at me for a moment, her hands shaking as she crumpled the papers. "You're going to regret this. Dad's already on my side, and when he finds out how cruel you're being, he's going to make you let me stay." I laughed bitterly. "Dad doesn't have any say in this house. It's mine. Susan, you can cry to him all you want, but it's not going to change anything." She looked like she was about to cry again, but instead she stormed up to her room and slammed the door. So hard I thought it would come off the hinges. The next 2 days were tense. Susan was sulking in her room most of the time, but she made sure to slam the doors or stomp around the house whenever she came out. She didn't speak to anyone, but the energy was awful, like we were all walking on eggshells. Jack and Kim stayed out of her way, but now she had had enough. On the second day, Susan left dirty dishes piled in the sink and didn't clean up after herself, and he confronted her in the kitchen. "You're not the only one who lives here, Susan. Clean up your mess." Susan snapped back. "Maybe you shouldn't even be here. This house is for family, not freeloaders. And you came straight to me and told me what Susan said." I couldn't believe it. Susan was now openly attacking my roommates, the same people who've done nothing but be patient with her. Nonsense. That night, I called a house meeting without Susan. I sat down with Jack, Kim, and Annie, and we all agreed. We couldn't let Susan keep making the house miserable. I promised them I'd handle it. The next morning, I sent Susan a final message. "This is your second reminder that you have 30 days to vacate the property. I've been more than fair, but your behavior toward me and the other tenants has gone too far. If you continue to violate house rules or harass anyone, I'll involve my lawyer again." She didn't respond, but I know her. She's planning her next move. The tension in the house had become unbearable. Susan was still sulking in her room, stomping around like a petulant child whenever she emerged to use the kitchen or bathroom. My other roommates, Jack, Kim, and Annie, had been tiptoeing around to avoid her wrath. Nobody wanted to set her off, because we all knew what she was capable of. I was counting down the days until her 30-day notice ran out in my mind. I kept reassuring myself that if we just rode out the clock, this nightmare would end. But Susan had other plans. It all came to a head on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage organizing some stuff for my small business. When I heard shouting from inside the house, Jack ran out to get me. "Dude, Susan's going nuts," he said out of breath. "She's throwing stuff around the living room and screaming at me." I dropped everything and ran inside. Sure enough, when I walked into the living room, Susan was in full meltdown mode, and she was standing near the wall with her arms crossed, looking both angry and stunned, while Susan was pacing around the room with tears streaming down her face. "You people are so ungrateful," Susan screamed, her voice cracking. "I'm pregnant. I'm carrying a child, and you're all treating me like garbage." "Susan, what the hell is going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned on me, pointing a shaking finger in my face. This is all your fault. I told you I needed help, and you're just kicking me out like I'm nothing. You don't care about family. You don't care about me or my baby." Before I could respond, she picked up one of the throw pillows from the couch and hurled it across the room like it was a weapon. It hit the coffee table and knocked over Annie's water bottle, which spilled everywhere, and he finally snapped. "You're insane, Susan. I've been patient, but this is it. You're treating us like garbage when we've done nothing to you. You're making this whole house miserable and miserable." Susan shrieked, clutching her stomach like she was playing the ultimate victim. "I'm the one who's been treated like dirt since I moved in. All I wanted was a little support, and you've all been against me since day one." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool as I approached her. "Susan, this has to stop. You can't throw tantrums and destroy things in a house that isn't yours. I've been more than fair. You're making this harder than it has to be." Susan's eyes narrowed at me, and for a moment I swear I saw something shift. It wasn't tears anymore. It was anger. "You think you're so righteous," she said, her voice suddenly quiet and dangerous. "You don't deserve this house. Grandma would have wanted me here. She would have wanted me to have a safe place for my baby." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Are you serious? Grandma didn't even let Mike in the house when she was alive. You're trying to rewrite history because it suits you. This is my house, Susan, not yours. Not Mike's, and certainly not Grandma's anymore. You need to accept that. She stood there, frozen for a moment, looking at me like I just slapped her. Then she did something I didn't expect. She stormed upstairs and slammed her bedroom door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. For the next hour, the house was silent. Jack and Kim helped me clean up the water Susan had spilled, and we all sat in the kitchen just waiting. None of us knew what her next move was going to be, but we were all on edge. Then Susan came back downstairs. This time she was dragging a suitcase behind her. Mike was outside in his truck, honking the horn like a jerk. Susan didn't say a word to any of us as she walked past. Her face was blotchy from crying, but she looked furious, like she'd swallowed her pride but was still simmering underneath. When she reached the front door, she stopped and turned around to face me. "I hope you're happy," she said, her voice cold. "You've ruined everything. I'll make sure Dad and Mom know exactly how awful you are. You're going to regret this someday." "I'm sure I won't," I replied calmly. She glared at me for a moment, then stormed outside. Mike loaded her suitcase into the truck, and they drove off. Tires squealing down the street. The house felt eerily quiet once she was gone, like we'd all just survived a hurricane. I stood in the living room for a minute, trying to process everything. Jack came up beside me and clapped me on the shoulder. "Well, that was dramatic," he said. "Understatement of the year," and he muttered as she joined us. "I'm just glad she's finally gone. I can't believe she threw a full tantrum like that. I knew she'd go out with a bang," Kim added, shaking her head. "But at least it's over." And it was. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Over the next few days, Susan continued to blow up my phone with angry texts and voicemails. I ignored them all. My dad called me twice to yell about how I'd abandoned my sister and acted like a monster, but I wasn't backing down. I calmly told him that Susan had made her own bed, and it wasn't my responsibility to fix her problems. Eventually, the calls and messages stopped. I guess Susan realized she wasn't getting anywhere with me. With Susan gone, the atmosphere in the house completely changed. Jack, Kim, and E and I finally felt like we could relax again. We cleaned up her room, which was left a mess, and I changed the locks one last time just to be safe. Looking back, I don't regret anything. I stood up for myself, my friends, and my home. Susan tried to manipulate, bully, and guilt trip me into giving up everything I'd worked for, but I didn't let her. It sucks that my dad and stepmom are still on her side, but at this point I've accepted it. Some people will always choose to see what they want to see. Final note. I know Susan's out there somewhere, probably telling everyone I'm the villain in her story, but I don't care. I'm finally free of her chaos, and the house feels like home again. If you take anything away from this, let it be this. Don't let entitled people walk all over you just because they're family. Set boundaries. Stand your ground. It's worth it. Story 4. In order for my golden kid half-brother to move in, Dad evicted me. He now wants me to be held accountable for the crime committed by my half-brother. I thus consented and prepared a surprising surprise for them in court. I have 20 EME. My father said that I was no longer welcome at home a year ago, which is when it all began. I can still clearly recall the talk. With his arms folded, he stood in the living room and made an announcement. "We require additional room. You need to locate somewhere else since your half-brothers are moving in." He stated it in such a casual manner, as if it didn't matter that he kicked his oldest kid out. I work weekends at a hardware shop and recently enrolled in a community college program. I inquired as to why. "My half-brother." He shrugged. "More than I did. His precious child deserved a cozy home." Even though I was in shock, I made the decision to keep my feelings to myself and departed in silence. The favorite was always my 19-year-old half-brother. He received the newest technology, the accolades from his parents, and the convenient justifications for his indolence or poor grades. I was supposed to stand by myself in the interim. I eventually moved on, leased a modest apartment, obtained a little better job, and made an effort to ignore the treachery. Then someone called. It was 2 weeks ago. My dad seemed anxious in his voice. He informed me that my half-brother had run into legal issues and that we needed your assistance. Very serious issues. He was charged with taking expensive devices from the garage of a neighbor. The cops had partial fingerprints, surveillance footage, text messages, and other evidence. Making plans to steal. If you take the blame, say it was you borrowing items, my father begged. We'll get you off with a slap on the wrist and get a nice lawyer. It is impossible for your half-brother to have a criminal record. His future will be ruined. I almost burst out laughing. For the sake of the son, they wanted me to fall beneath the bus. I was passed over. They pretended that I owed them allegiance. As if the humiliation of being expelled wasn't enough. I answered, "Sure, I'll do it," even though I should have hung up at that point. I was shocked at how composed it was. With a sigh of relief, my father promised cash beneath the table and perhaps even a spot back in the house. The level of entitlement was astounding. They thought I would just cooperate. What? They were unaware. I have all of the old recordings and messages stored. I recalled how my father and half-brother boasted about deceiving others, how they thought I was useless, and how now they wanted me to slay their precious kid. I then began to plot my retaliation. I contacted a buddy of mine who was a lawyer and whom I had met at the hardware shop. He gave me informal legal advice and was a frequent customer. I occasionally described my circumstances. He offered a plan. Act as though you agree. Compile all of the proof. Then, in court, reveal the truth. So I did just that. I promised my father that I would testify that I had accidentally taken the goods. At our most recent meeting, my half-brother grinned, assuming he would be safe. He even gave me a few $100s as a token of appreciation. By my quiet as if, let him believe he is. I've got a strategy. I requested my father and half-brother to meet me at a diner on the outskirts of town 1 week before to the trial. Somehow, I had to get them on the record. According to my lawyer buddy, one party's consent is sufficient for recordings in our state. Excellent. I got there early. I put my phone, running the recording app, in the pocket of my jacket. My father appeared nervous as they entered. My half-brother wearing high-end clothing, drinking a latte that he had brought. No salutations. Are you certain that you will do this? Because we will stop assisting you if you make a mistake. Slumping my shoulders and speaking in a low voice, I did my bit. I grinned and added, I would deny my half-brother. Excellent. Simply inform the judge that you borrowed the devices. Perhaps you were inebriated or disoriented. Dad's attorney will make it up. We'll cover your penalties. You won't have time. Easy. I made myself look unsure by nodding. And after this, what do I get? I inquired. My dad dismissed it with a sweep of his hand. We promise to assist you financially. Isn't that sufficient? To the family, you owe it. Instead, I wanted to yell because of the blatant entitlement. Silently, I said, Of course, thank you. My half-brother rolled his eyes, just to be sure. Don't botch this up. They thought I was totally on board, so they departed. Every word was captured on my phone. They now acknowledged that they wanted me to bear the blame. I forced them to acknowledge that my half-brother's room contained the pilfered items. He boasted about hiding them. Yes. Fools. They provided me with precisely what I need. The trial date drew near. In an attempt to coach me on my testimony, my father's upscale attorney reached out to me. Playing stupid, I nodded in agreement with his statement. Do you recall? They were taken by you. Nobody else. Write a straightforward tale. I asked naively. However, what if my half-brother is questioned by the prosecution? He sneered. He was not involved in it. Simply follow the script. Additional proof of collaboration. Just before the trial, my lawyer buddy assisted me in presenting the prosecutor with the recorded evidence. The eyes of the prosecutor grew wide. The clarity is excellent. She responded, We'll play this in court. They will be buried by this. I nodded, experiencing a mixture of worry and happiness. They deserved it, but I was putting my own family in danger. Throughout the hearing day, I entered the courtroom. Sitting smugly behind their defense table were my father and my half-brothers. Their attorney winked at me, as though we were sharing a secret. The prosecution started questioning witnesses once the judge brought the meeting to order. I took a big breath, went onto the stage when it was my turn, and was ready to give the performance of a lifetime. "Do you acknowledge stealing the gadgets?" the prosecutor inquired. I added, "Actually, I have a confession," after a theatrical pause during which I looked at my father and half-brother's eager looks. Nothing was taken by me. However, I am aware of who used gas in the courtroom. My dad's face became white. The performance had started. The defense attorney leaped to his feet. Disapproval. It was overturned by the judge. Interested in hearing my account, I politely explained. My father and half-brother asked me to lie in court and take the blame for a crime I didn't commit. I watched as my half-brother's mouth fell open. My dad gave a fierce shake of his head, but I went on. To spare my half-brother from a criminal record, they offered me money and other benefits in exchange for accepting the responsibility. I was told to deliver the evidence by the prosecutor's nod. I gave the memory stick containing the taped talk from the diner. For everyone to hear, the prosecutor played it out loud. Through the speakers, I heard my father's voice telling me to lie. In a mocking tone, my half-brother demands that I bear the blame. With tension high and the judge's brow wrinkled, the courtroom went quiet. The jurors appeared horrified. By accusing me of entrapment, my father's attorney attempted damage control. However, the court reminded him that I had every right to defend myself and that one-party consent recording is allowed in our state. Furthermore, the police did not organize this sting operation. Just me collecting evidence of coercion. The face of my half-brother went from crimson to white. He whispered something to his lawyer, who appeared to be in a panic. The prosecution made a strong point. In order for your half-brother to live comfortably, you were forced to leave your house. They now asked you to put yourself at risk of a criminal record for him. I gave a nod. Indeed, that's right. If I had any other evidence, the judge inquired. I brought up the coach's testimony and the phone conversations. My lawyer acquaintance was brought by the prosecutor as a witness to the correspondence I would be receiving from their attorney. He testified that I had overheard certain suggestions without violating attorney-client privilege, because I was only a victim of their scam and never a customer of that attorney. It seemed awful. My father and half-brother are in terrible shape. In a last-ditch effort, the defense said I made everything up. However, the prosecution's tech expert confirmed that the tapes were genuine. Don't tamper. The prosecution asked for a break in order to submit further accusations as the trial went on. Conspiracy, obstruction of the legal system, suborn perjury. It was allowed by the judge. My dad and my half-brother appeared to be stuck. They had entered a courtroom anticipating that I would tell lies on their behalf, never dreaming that I would publicly reverse the situation. They were deluded by their entitlement. My father made an attempt to talk to me in the corridor during recess. He was halted by a bailiff. He mouthed the words, and I saw it. I just gave you a chilly grin, but you'll regret it. Slumping in a corner was my half-brother, defeated. They lost horribly when they bet on my compliance. The prosecutor presented the fresh charges when the court resumed. Stumbling, the defense attorney requested a postponement. The judge concurred. However, because of their actions in attempting to frame me, my father and half-brother are currently being arrested. My half-brother's initial theft allegation was solid enough, but it would be very difficult for him to get away with it now. They had run out of scapegoats. In the days that followed, arrest warrants were issued for my father and my half-brother on conspiracy and witness tampering charges. The case involving the stolen gadgets was still ongoing, but the prosecution could easily trace the crime back to my half-brother, since I had gained credibility as a genuine witness. They have rights. The attempt to blame me had failed miserably. At a quick hearing to formally file the charges, I saw my father one last time. Mouthing an apology and pleading for forgiveness, he attempted to communicate with me through the courthouse window. Beside him, my half-brother stood scowling as though I was solely to blame. It was deliciously ironic. To maintain their impeccable reputation, they asked me to sacrifice my freedom. They would now have to deal with the fallout from their deceit and deception. I went back to my tiny flat following the court proceedings. I felt more liberated than ever as I took in the simple furnishings and the used television. Yes, my family rejected me and attempted to take advantage of me, but I had shown that I wasn't their pawn. I outwitted them and made sure that, in front of a judge and jury, the truth was revealed where it was most important. They may be subject to jail time, fines, and other severe consequences. They would lose their reputations. Eventually, the stolen equipment were discovered concealed in the closet of my half-brother's former bedroom, just as he had suggested. More proof sealed his doom. Once dismissing me like trash, my father would now watch as his golden child was sentenced to prison. They may accuse me. I owe them nothing, whether you call me disloyal. They caused this for themselves. I don't rejoice in this result. That's right. Although it's unfortunate that it had to happen this way, justice may occasionally taste both sour and sweet. I discovered that I have a strong backbone, and that I will not bow down to those who, in a sense, consider me expendable. Through this experience, I discovered my voice. As word got out in our neighborhood, several family members who were horrified by my father and half-brother's actions reached out. Some said they were sorry they had ever doubted me. Others remained silent because they found the reality upsetting. I didn't require their blessing. I had my freedom, my dignity, and the joy of defeating their devious plan. The scapegoat has been removed. I can concentrate on my personal life, saving money and completing my college program, perhaps ultimately relocating to a better location. The sight from the courtroom. I will never forget the moment the recording began, serving as a reminder that it was worth the danger to defend myself. Click the subscribe button if you enjoy seeing entitled schemers fail. I promise you that I have more surprises in store. Story 4. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hello everyone. I'll go right in because I'm not sure how to begin. I've been putting this tale off for a long, and I'm not sure if that's because I've been too busy keeping my life together or because I'm still processing things. In any case, here we are. I am 48 years old, and my wife Donna is 47, a woman. We've been wed for 25 years, almost 25 years actually, whether that is still relevant at all. We have 2 wonderful children, a 20-year-old son serving in the military and a 22-year-old daughter completing college. Despite our imperfections, we managed to make life work. I also believe that we were a team for the majority of those years. However, the past 5 years or so have been difficult. I will not sugarcoat the situation. When her father died, Donna's mother had no one else to care for her once she got dementia in her early 60s. Donna then requested if she could move in with us. I'm not a monster, you see. Although I didn't particularly like the notion, I consented since I understood how essential it was to her. I was not aware at the time of how much it would drain us both. I'm speaking to anyone who has provided care for someone who has dementia. The days turn into a never-ending cycle of assistance, reminders, and cleanup. Imagine being worn out all the time while you watch someone you love deteriorate a bit more each day. Donna was the most affected. She was always anxious, fearing that she would become just as stressed as her mother during COVID. We felt as though we were imprisoned in a stress bubble. There was no getting around it because we both worked from home. Her mother would become irritated about a minor issue and lose it, or she would roam the house and forget where she was. I would sit there and reassure Donna that we were in this together when she would weep at night and occasionally tell me she didn't believe she could do it any longer. We've survived the worst of it, I thought, when her mom eventually went into a memory care facility early this year. The harm has already done, but things will improve now. Donna had changed. She felt bad about placing her mother in a different residence. She confided in me that she thought time was passing her by, as if she didn't have much time before dementia took over. I made an effort to comfort her, but nothing I said ever seemed to resonate. After the children were out of the home and her mother was looking after them, we had always discussed taking a trip. That was the strategy. Together, we would sell the house, resign from our jobs, and embark on a global tour. We had a timeline, too. 2023 summer. We put money aside for it. We spent years discussing it. I vividly recall Donna telling me that one day, it will simply be the wide road, you and me. She described waking up without a plan, sleeping in little bed breakfasts, and traveling through small villages. We would sit and imagine destinations for hours. We would visit the Grand Canyon, Italy, and Greece. Her expression would change as if she could already see it, and I took her word for it. I believed that was something we were both anticipating. I believed that we were still in agreement. Then one day, after returning home from a round of errands, I noticed a note on the kitchen table. At first, I didn't give it much thought. I thought she had given me some mail, but as I opened it, I felt sick to my stomach. "I apologize," it said. "I must discover who I am. I can't continue to live this way, even though I love you. Please make an effort to comprehend. When I'm ready, I'll return." What it was like to read that is beyond words. As if I couldn't comprehend the words I was seeing, I remained there for a minute, clutching the letter and attempting to digest it. Did she just walk out? No argument, no warning, no fight. Simply gone. I began analyzing things after taking a glance around the place. She was half naked. She missed some of her favorite things. She hadn't actually gone to spend a weekend with a pal. She went out. I attempted to contact her and got her voicemail. I also texted her, inquiring about her whereabouts and general well-being. No answer. My mind flew into overdrive, considering every scenario. Has something taken place? Was she secure? After that, I looked into our financial accounts. I saw it at that moment. She had embezzled the majority of our savings. It was more than simply her cash. Our money was involved. For the vacation we were meant to take together, we had saved money for years. The feelings I had upon seeing that number are beyond words. All of my emotions, shock, rage, betrayal, came at me at once. I was unable to concentrate for the following few days. She seemed to vanish off the face of the planet, despite my repeated attempts to contact her. Then, a week later, my daughter was pacing the kitchen while holding her phone and shaking her head as if she was incredulous at what she was seeing. "She seems content, Dad. What does she look like?" "Joyful." She showed me the photo of Donna smiling with a group of strangers on her phone. Somewhere, Donna was sitting with sunglasses on a beach. I was surrounded by unfamiliar faces, complete strangers. Not a single face I recognized. I recall thinking when I gazed at their phony grins, who are these individuals? Like, with your entire family at home, how can you just show up and join a bunch of strangers? It said in the caption, "To freedom, cheers. Finding contentment and starting over." I'm not sure what freedom she believed she was celebrating, but it was definitely not mine. Is she completely unconcerned about us? My daughter's voice cracked as she asked. I was unsure of how to respond. What should I have said? That the lady who gave her a hug through every heartache, who sat at her soccer matches, and who reared her had just up and gone. "I don't know, kiddo," I murmured, placing a hand on her shoulder. If only I had a response. She didn't weep. "I don't even know who she is anymore," she mumbled instead. After that, she walked back to her room and shut the door. That was the hardest thing to strike me. My kid, who formerly looked up to her mother, treats her as though she's a complete stranger. The money wasn't the only factor. It was the decision she made to go. She didn't simply abandon me. Her family was abandoned by her. On the 25-year life we have created together, the impact this would have on our children didn't even concern her. I was left to pick up the pieces, but she didn't seem to care. I stared at my phone for days, hoping for a call, text, or whatever, but it never came. I began to comprehend something at that point that has been with me ever since. I didn't cause Donna to leave. She departed because she no longer wanted to be in charge. The actual chaos began at that point. The days that followed were chaotic. I discovered she had been preparing this for some time after looking through all of our joint accounts. She must have done a lot of planning for our vacation. She ended up owning that. She spent almost all of the money we had saved together over the years. Our future, poof, lost. I made another attempt to phone her, directly to voicemail. I texted, nothing. She seemed to vanish. At the time, my daughter, who was still in college, also made an effort to get in touch. One text message was returned to her. "I need this, yet I love you," Donna said. "When you're older, you'll comprehend. Tell your brother that I'm all right. You get it? Know what? That my wife simply left her family and life to play freely and unattached. Yes. No. When Donna began posting more on Instagram, things became worse. She wasn't just at any beach. We were expected to spend time together on cruises, go out to clubs, eat at upscale restaurants, and do other activities. She was accompanied in each photo by this bunch of individuals who were obviously irresponsible. How she found them is a mystery to me. Did I never meet them before, or were they some old friends, a group on the internet? I only knew that she appeared to be having a great time. Even bad were the captions. You only got one life, etc. Don't squander it. Be grateful for friends who encourage you. Raise yourself up. When we were interacting with her mother, where were they? When she cried at night, where were they? Worried that she would get dementia. Those pals must only be enjoyable when you have money to spend and nothing binding you. However, I lost my mind over one post. In fact, she expressed her gratitude to her wonderful spouse for understanding and supporting her during this journey. The want to hurl my phone across the room was strong. I had nothing to support. I had no idea where she was. It seemed as though she was attempting to depict me at home, grinning and waving her away, as though this was all a part of a larger scheme. I was frantically trying to find out how to pay the debts she left me in the interim. The mortgage was due. The utilities were the automobile payments. My wife stole the most of our money, but I didn't care. Although I had always been cautious with money, I never thought I would suddenly have to manage this home alone. A few weeks later, I began to see the wider picture. Donna didn't just discover who she was. She was fleeing the life we had created, the difficult moments, and the obligations. I now know that she had been harboring animosity for years, even though I had assumed we had been on the same page during this whole ordeal. And she ran away rather than speaking to me like a grown-up. My children and I got down to go over everything. I wasn't going to lie for her, but I also didn't want them to hear my resentful side. My kid was furious because he was stationed across the nation. It was in his voice that I heard. In fact, his voice was tight with frustration when he contacted me earlier. What the devil is happening, Dad? Mom is acting as like nothing is wrong, and I just received a text from her. She wrote and gave me a photo of a damn sunset. I hope all is okay with you, miss. Do you miss me? Even so, what does that mean? He stopped and I could hear him inhale to relax. Dad, she cannot act as though this is not a serious matter. She can't send me photos of sunsets as if nothing is wrong. You're correct. She doesn't, I informed him. Has she spoken to you then? Given you a valid explanation? I wanted to say something to calm him down, but I was at a loss for words. No, I said. She grabbed the money, left a note, and vanished. Dad, I don't understand. How is that accomplished? How can you simply abandon your family in that manner? Son, I'm not sure, I answered, attempting to maintain a steady tone of voice. I'm not sure. But what about my daughter? She was going through her mother's Instagram as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, and she kept shaking her head. This isn't normal, she observed to her father. Mom is behaving like she's 25, rushing about with these individuals. I was thinking the same thing, but I didn't say it aloud. Donna has always had a slight obsession with maintaining her youthful appearance. She looked after herself, worked out, always try to look your best. That's what I used to adore about her. However, it appeared that she now wished to destroy the life that we had spent decades creating. The carelessness of it all. My psyche was bled. This woman had been whining for years that we couldn't do this or that because we had too many obligations, and now she was dismissing it all as if the rest of us were still here and still living in the same world. She chose to give up. I didn't expect her to be a martyr, but I also didn't imagine she would simply desert us. I was having trouble understanding that section. She had always been the planner and the well-organized person. Nevertheless, she didn't hesitate to leave everything behind. But that's what really grabbed me. Every few days she would contact our daughter, saying things like, I miss you. All I need is time. When I'm ready, I'll return. As if she were going on a spiritual retreat. She wasn't having fun with her new pals in Bali or wherever she had landed up. But what are you ready for? To return home and act as if nothing had occurred. After everything, she genuinely thought she could just stroll back into our life as if we had been waiting for her. The rage began to sink in at that point. I was first too surprised to feel anything other than bewildered. Now, however, I was beginning to recognize Donna's actions now. She wasn't simply disoriented or perplexed. She was acting self-centeredly. It's simple. She was completely mistaken if she believed that I would wait here indefinitely for her to come to her senses. I eventually began to come to terms with the fact that my wife was living it up on social media, like some influencer on a perpetual vacation, after observing her for a month. Not only did she leave, but her lack of guilt about it was what truly annoyed me. She would always publish something new, just when I felt she was beyond my ability to be surprised. Leaving is one thing, but projecting an air of freedom is quite another. Simply being true to yourself when your spouse is at home, becoming overwhelmed by expenses. Furthermore, your children are unsure about what to believe. She shared a video about her tale one day. It was a group of her female friends and a few guys. Someone was saying, "Donna, you must stay with us for the New Year's party," in the background. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere," she added. "Now I'm free." Release the word once again. As if she had spent 25 years chained to something rather than married, raising children, and creating a life. It infuriated me. When I vented to a few close friends, they all had the same reaction. "You should consult a lawyer." The problem was that I had previously done it. The week following Donna's departure, I met with my attorney. She informed me that since she hadn't actually abandoned anything but me, there wasn't much I could do legally at this point. I would have to wait for her to return, or at the very least make herself available to receive documents if I desired a divorce. I blocked all of her remaining credit cards in the meanwhile. Made sure her phone was off and frozen anything she might attempt to access. Our family's strategy. I was pretty smart about the phone thing, because she ended up dropping out of the plan entirely when I blocked international calls. Little triumphs, I suppose. My daughter contacted me a few weeks later. After she hung up with Donna, she gave me a call. Her voice was trembling with annoyance. "I just need to get out of here before it's too late," Donna apparently told her. "When you have your own family one day, you'll comprehend." That was the tipping point for me. Bless her. My daughter tried to reason with her. She expressed our collective hurt to Donna, how she couldn't simply flee this life. What was said by Donna? "I have to be self-centered now. When I'm ready, I'll return." Selfish? I'm not joking. I saw her post shortly after we had that conversation. Something about being with her tribe in Bali. Her people? For her group of freeloaders, she had a new term. Right now. She sounded like she had read too many self-help books, I promise. In order to keep the house and cars paid for, I was working long hours and making sure our children didn't go completely crazy. Additionally, she was dancing barefoot with her new tribe at a beach bonfire. No obligations, no guilt. I actually began to wonder at one point if she had planned any of this before she left. Were these people she met online? Were they some sort of group that persuaded her to flee? It seemed to me that she had been getting ready for months as I gave it more thought. The trip must have been planned by her. These must have been the people she was speaking to. Hell, she probably quit her job weeks before I even noticed she was unhappy. But the thing is, whenever I tried asking her for an address to send her legal paperwork, because yes, I was done waiting, she texted back. "We'll talk about it when I'm ready to come back." She actually believed she could just waltz back into our lives, like we'd all been sitting around waiting for her to find herself. I guess that Donna didn't think she'd done anything wrong. In her mind, this was all perfectly justified. She deserved this. And we were supposed to understand. The entitlement was insane. By the end of that month, I'd had enough. The anger was starting to outweigh the confusion. This wasn't some midlife crisis anymore. This was who she was now. And I wasn't about to sit here and play the role of the supportive husband. So the next day, I called my lawyer again. I told her I was ready to file for divorce. She has to find a way. No more waiting. No more hoping. I wanted out. She told me we couldn't officially file yet because Donna was still off-grid, but we could have everything ready to go. The papers were drawn up. Asset division repayment for the money she took. The whole thing. The lawyer explained that since I'd been keeping up with the mortgage and the bills alone, the courts would likely factor that in. The plan was simple. When Donna came back, because eventually she would, she'd get served. No explanations, no apologies, just paperwork. I'll be honest. Deciding to divorce her wasn't simple. You don't spend 25 years with someone and simply let it go overnight. But I wasn't the one who left. I wasn't the one who emptied our cash and uploaded photos with random people in Bali while my family picked up the pieces. Donna made her choice. Now I was cooking. My Thanksgiving was coming up, and I wasn't sure what to do at first. My daughter didn't want to remain home. Too many memories of family dinners with her mom. I didn't blame her. My son couldn't come back from his base, so there was just the two of us. Then out of nowhere, Donna's sister contacted me. She invited us to their place for Thanksgiving. I wasn't sure what to say at first. Wouldn't that be strange? When I showed up, I didn't want everyone to be gazing at me and wondering what Donna was doing. However, what her sister said resonated with me. Her decisions shouldn't prevent you from starting a family. I said, yes. The day before Thanksgiving, we made the drive to Donna's sister's house. Even though I was so anxious, it wasn't weird when we entered. It wasn't strange. My daughter and I were embraced by Donna's relatives, who pretended nothing had changed. I believe they were ashamed of Donna's actions, but nobody brought it up. They only greeted us and made an effort to make the day pleasant. I thought things could become strange when Donna's mother's name was spoken, but her brother put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You did right by her, man." Everyone is aware of that. I didn't feel totally alone for the first time in months. As my daughter and I ate and laughed with everyone at the table, I pondered whether Donna was even aware of what she had thrown away. We were there, but she wasn't. We continued to feel like a family. After we returned home, my daughter shared a simple Thanksgiving photo of her and her aunt and uncle grinning. Nothing spectacular, nothing suspicious. Until Donna texted my daughter 2 days later, I didn't give it any thought. I looked at the photo. "I hope both of you are doing well. I'm going to return for Christmas. Then, we'll speak." I didn't have to speak at all. "I just saw the text," my daughter remarked. "She is quite brave." I shook my head and grinned a bit. Donna was unaware that I would be prepared by Christmas. My lawyer and the paperwork were prepared, and when she returned expecting to speak, she was taken by surprise. I was surprised by how calm the weeks before Christmas were. Donna was not communicating with me. She was also posting less on Instagram. No photos of the beach. Nothing. No group dinners. She seemed to be winding down, but not in a positive manner. I began to wonder what she would do next. Did she believe that this brief reprieve would endure forever? As far as I knew, she was unemployed, homeless, and had spent the most of the money she had stolen. Perhaps she was being caught up by reality. Meanwhile, I was getting ready for her to come back. Together with my attorney, I ensured that the divorce documents were prepared. She clarified that the courts would take it into account because I had been paying the mortgage, bills, and other expenses. We would divide assets according to fairness, rather than what Donna believed she was entitled to, and she would owe me for what she stole. I also ensured that the home was secured. They replaced the locks. They changed the security code. Previously, the emergency key was concealed beneath the flower pot. Lost. I was not going to take any chances. When Donna returned, I had no idea what to anticipate. However, I was aware of one thing. She wasn't returning to my place as though she still lived there. Without placing too much pressure on my kid, I made an effort to keep her informed as much as possible. I didn't want to exacerbate her already existing anger toward her mother. She asked me one evening whether I believed Donna had intended to return for Christmas. "I'll be here," she said. I informed her. "I'm prepared for her. Is she likely to apologize?" I paused to consider that before responding. "I'm not sure, but even if she is, her actions remain unchanged." Donna texted me again a few days before Christmas. Brief and easy. "The 23rd is when I'll be in town. Let's have a conversation." That was it. Don't apologize, no justification. Let's just chat. I spent some time looking at the text, partly expecting to feel anything, perhaps anger, sadness. However, nothing was present. I was, if anything, relieved. I was relieved to have a plan at last, that I was no longer waiting around. I responded with a single text. All right. In actuality, there was nothing more to discuss. Donna was not yet aware of that, but she would. I was going to give her the divorce papers when she arrived at my house, expecting us to have a lengthy, tearful talk. This year's Christmas was going to be different, but I was prepared. I made sure everything was in order, cleaned the house, and then sat down to wait on the 23rd. Probably for the best, my daughter spent the night at her friend's house. I didn't want her to witness the impending disaster. My heart was racing when the doorbell finally rang, but I maintained a composed expression. Donna was standing there as if nothing had changed when I opened the door. She had a nice appearance. She always did, of course. However, there was a look in her eyes that suggested she might have thought I would be delighted to see her. At first, I remained silent. I simply gazed at her. Hello? With a little smile, she said, as if it were another day. I didn't return the smile. I picked up the manila envelope from the table behind me and gave it to her. What is this? She inquired. She was losing her grin. Divorce documents, I said. As if she hadn't heard me correctly, Donna blinked. What? Why? You left, I murmured, staring her in the eyes. You made a decision. I own this. And that's it. The discussion was over. She was still as she stood. I'm not sure what she was expecting when she arrived, but it was definitely not that. I briefly feared that she might burst into tears, but instead she remarked, You didn't have to do this, as she glanced at the package in her hands. I about lost it at just one line. I didn't have to. I said it again. You went out. You stole our money, fled with unidentified people, and pretended that I didn't mind. Donna, you are the one who accomplished this. Not me. She seemed to be about to protest, but she stopped herself. In months, for the first time. I believe she recognized the extent of the situation. She took a little step back, as though she was unsure whether to enter or go. May I enter? At last, her voice became softer as she inquired. No, I replied. I wasn't impolite. I wasn't being emotional or shouting. I had just finished. I've stopped letting her set the rules. I'm done allowing her to come and go from my life as if nothing had occurred. We just stood there for a while. I was at the doorway and she was on the porch. She gazed about as if she were surveying the house, the yard, the residence she had left behind. What was going through her head, I wondered? Did she regret it? Did she feel ashamed? Was she even concerned? Can we at least have a conversation? She inquired. Please. I sighed, not so much indignant as exhausted. Donna, there's nothing else to say. Everything you need to know is stated in the documents. Without saying another word, she gazed down at the envelope after giving me another long glance. She walked back to her car after turning. I saw her leave in her car. It was silent on Christmas Eve. We spent the evening wrapping a few presents and watching movies once my daughter got home. Donna wasn't mentioned by either her or myself. Both of us were sick of discussing it. My daughter once asked me whether she thought her mother would sign the documents. Sincerely, I answered, I don't know. But we're still going. Donna had left. Perhaps she had been gone for a long time before she really departed. Perhaps I was too preoccupied with keeping things together to see that the lady I married was already fading away, 1 year at a time. She was not returning anyhow. Not at all, and that was all right. Tidying up loose ends took up the next few weeks. I was informed by my attorney that we may proceed with the divorce, even if Donna didn't want to help. But I didn't think she would resist. She hadn't given much thought to the future since she had been too preoccupied with chasing sunsets and hazy notions of independence. Donna eventually signed the documents around the middle of January. Not a message. No justification. The bottom of the page just has her signature. My lawyer phoned to inform me that it was completed. I was not as relieved as I had hoped. It wasn't a momentous occasion for which I raised my fists in celebration. It was like shutting a door that was too long cracked open. Whatever it is she believes she is after, I hope she finds it. I do. It won't be with me, though. Life feels stable now that a few months have passed. It is quieter in the house, but in a pleasant manner. In the end, I sold it. Reduce your space so it doesn't feel so empty. I resumed my social life, acquired a few pastimes that I had previously neglected throughout the years. My children are also doing well. My son is doing well in the military, and my daughter will soon graduate. All of us have adapted to this new reality, and to be honest, it's better than I anticipated. I have no regrets about the years I spent with Donna. I have no regrets about the sacrifices, the difficult moments, or even the enjoyable ones. I regret believing that I had to keep everything together by myself, that in order to regain my life, I would have to wait for her to decide she was done discovering herself. I didn't. And I'm beginning to realize that at last, I want to share this with everyone who is going through a similar situation and is waiting for someone who has already made up their mind. You are not required to wait. When something is gone, you don't have to keep it. Sometimes the best course of action is to let go. And I did just that for myself. I appreciate you reading.